Bro, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, dude, glad to be here.
Nick Laidlaw, Battles and Beers, hence the beers. So this is what you initially thought when you were like, because you started this in the Marine Corps, correct? Or the idea of it came?
Yeah, just after the Marine Corps. So
Yeah.
initially B&B was like a failed podcast, essentially. I have no technical know-how of how to run that. Just a couple buddies and I did it. And it's hard to get 5 guys all online in a Zoom meeting with mics that work. And so we kind of gave up with that, and then I just continued with the Instagram page and just kind of got cyberbullied into doing what I'm doing now, basically.
Yeah. Because immediately you're like, I was like, we got to have beers. Because the man, you're like, what are you drinking? I was like, well, we're going to have beers. It's Nick Laidlaw, Battles and Beers. We're going to discuss battles, and we're going to drink some beers. And then Stella, what was behind Stella? Or just like Stella?
I like Stella, and then also... it's a family tradition to have Rottweiler dogs, and they're all named after someone's favorite wine or beer and stuff like that. And so the Rottweiler we've got currently, her name is Stella.
No,
yeah.
Dude, I almost got Heineken's because we were drinking Heineken's in Afghanistan. So I was like, but I don't drink beer all that often. I drink bourbon.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't need to buy a fucking case of Heineken. That's gonna sit in my fridge for the next 6 months. But I was like, that's what we drank in Afghanistan. We actually we bought out all the black market Heinekens in the Sorobi district. So it was kind of one of our claim to fame while we were in Afghanistan. But no, so we'll start off. Okay, so you were in the Marine Corps 03-11?
Yep, I was in 11.
Yeah, 11. Yeah. How was that? And start from there.
So I came in at the very tail end of the combat phase of the GWAT, so I didn't really get to have the Marine rifleman experience that I wanted. I signed up to go to war, ended up doing 3 deployments, but we didn't do anything of note, really. I didn't get the experience that I wanted. So I did 5 years active duty and 3 years in the reserve. Even though I didn't get to fulfill my purpose as a rifleman, I'm still very proud of my service, that I showed up, did my obligation, and then more. It was a good experience. I loved the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So. You were a DM too, right?
I was.
You went to DM school?
Yep, I went to the school in Damnack.
Okay, yeah. How was that? Damnack? There was the Team 6 guys or whatever?
Yeah. Their facility was right next to our range. And
okay.
Then, there was one day they landed a little bird on the range, got off, shot a bunch of I don't know what they were. We were too far away.
Do you know because they posted their Instagram right away after that?
The silent professionals, right?
We gotta hit their profiles.
But yeah, there's the DM school there. It's 4 weeks long. It was the best school I did in the Marine Corps. All our instructors were scout snipers, and they were very sure to make sure that we knew we were not scout snipers. But it was an awesome school. We did a little bit of stalking, stuff like that. It was fun.
So the really DM course. So they introduced DMs in 2000, I think 7, in the Marine Corps because we were coming off my second deployment as a scout sniper. And 2-3, our sister unit, came in, and they had DM rifles in the squads. And that was when they had the DM rifles had Leopolds on them, I believe. They were match grade barrels. They looked like M16s, but then they had a suppressor on it, and they're full auto. So everyone was like, "Why the fuck are the DM rifles full auto?" And they're like, "We don't know. They just came that way." But they were pretty accurate. I mean, they had surefire suppressors. I remember Leopold optics. Excuse me. And they were trying to get the DMs in all the squads. I don't know. Was that you were like I said, you're younger than me. Was that an official thing in the Marine Corps when you joined? Was DMs part of it, or was that just the end of the Iraq War? Or, it's one of those idea fairy things.
I think it was more of a battalion thing.
Battalion,
because I was in fast company. And
okay.
Yeah, so each platoon had 6 DMs in it.
Oh, okay. So
And then when we went to the schoolhouse, they were just phasing out the M39. So the material to study was for that basically just a Gucci'd up M14.
Yeah.
And then when we got there, we got the very first M110s that the Marine Corps got issued. And so that was the
11s?
only.
Is the Mark 11s or was
it
the
M110? So the 7.62x51.
Yeah. The Mark we call the Mark 11s.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, and it was awesome. It was the very first piece of new gear I had ever got, and I still remember the serial number for it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
See, you had good Mark 11s. We had shit Mark 11s. We always by my phase of the war, it was oh, here's this fucking blown out piece of shit. I hated the Mark 11. I mean, they were okay. It was okay. I hated it more when I was a contractor. So I carried one. and the thing was wildly inaccurate because it had been blown through like, you know, for a few years. They didn't keep up with it. And then we had the qual to make sure we kept our DDM pay in Afghanistan. So I hated them, but they were okay in the teams, but you know, it was kind of like, well, might as well just carry an M4 and then carry the M48-3. It's kind of like the 50 cal. Everyone I got out there like, oh, you're a scout sniper. You got the Sasser. Do you have the 50 cal? The BMG. I was like, yeah, it fucking sucks. We hate it. I had two of my buddies. Morales was one of them. He loved that fucking thing. He was like, I will hump that thing all day. Just because, like, in his mind, he thought he was going to, like, blow people away with, like, a 50 cal. And I was like, fucking keep them. So our general support teams had them. And I was like, dude, fuck that thing. Those packs weigh like 100 pounds because it's you're carrying the upper and lower receiver. And then you got, you know, each magazine, I think, weighed 10 pounds. Basically 10 rounds for 10 pounds. So you're like, okay, so 50 rounds is fucking 50 pounds or whatever. You know, it's like it's some ungodly amount of weight to carry into hides.
I shot one once when we were in Kuwait with the Army. We did some work with their snipers.
Yeah.
And I still preferred the M110.
Yeah. It's like, again, if there's an application for it, you're like, cool, but it's not. It's like getting slapped in the face every time you pull the trigger. And then, like, we were on a range once in Hawaii, and they were like, our lieutenant was a dipshit. So he ended up getting... instead of getting a bunch of 7.62 ammo for our M48-3s to like really zero them in, we're getting real confident. They like swapped it. So basically we have a little bit of 7.62 ammo, which is our primary sniper rifle. We had a ass ton of 50 cal. So now we have to burn through this 50. And it was like, it was way too much ammo.
Yeah.
And they were just like, all right, burn it off. I'm like, okay. So I just put my head down and just started pulling the trigger. And then he's like, you need to at least try. I was like, try? I have to burn through like 500 rounds of fucking 50. I'm not going to try for shit. You put your head down and you just start pulling the trigger because we need to rip through these fucking rounds to get off this goddamn range, you know?
Just dump him to the bush monster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably that's what we should have. Especially there. We could have easily done it. Yeah. Hawaii, could have easily fucking done that shit. All right, so you did that. You got into the Battles and Beers accounts. Like, how did the evolution of that then happen?
So, like I said, it was the podcast initially. I think like some episodes are still up on like Apple Music or Spotify or something like that. Because I get people all the time. It's like, are you ever gonna like update the Spotify? I'm like, fuck no, I'm not.
It's like 5 years later.
That's like way too much work.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that episode for 5 years now.
It's a loyal fan right there.
Yeah.
So everyone kind of like fell off of B&B, but I stuck with it, and I was posting a lot on Facebook and Instagram of just like I would write up like an anniversary post of like the Battle of the Somme or Verdun, Stalingrad, stuff like that. And then I started like reading, you know, like a good young man should. Started reading books.
Yeah.
And I remember I started with Helmet for My Pillow, and then with the Old Breed. I was like uploading like small excerpts from there, and people started commenting like similar stories that like their grandpas had told them or that they had. Yeah. And that kind of like put the seed in my brain where it's like there's a ton of like unwritten books in these people's heads. Yeah. You know, I should try to write some of these down. Mm-hmm. And so I started like finding people online, posting in a lot of like veteran Facebook groups, like, hey, I'm just trying to get some stories. Does anyone want to talk to me? And I would get like, I'd post like 10 places and I'd get like maybe one response. Yeah. You know, but it was fun for me. I enjoyed it and I loved it. And then like being able to like capture that guy's experience and like put it somewhere and save it was just priceless to me, and it's still priceless. I still get the same feeling every time I get like an interview done. You know, it's like that's another piece of history that's gonna outlive me. I used to like go on like YouTube comment sections. That was a great place to look to because like everyone comments there. Even like a VA hospital like waiting room, there's a lot of old veterans in there who have nothing to do but sit in the waiting room for 2.5 hours, so that's a good place to talk to them. And that was kind of like the beginning of the shift from like taking stuff from books to finding my own, not my own stories, but gathering the stories of other people. So like even still to this day, I don't really consider myself a journalist or an author. I think of myself more as just like a carrier pigeon, like the middleman. You know, like I'm just bringing the story from point A to point B. Point A being the guy who experienced it or his grandson or his letters that he left behind to point B is the reader. Yeah. I'm just the middleman.
So it's like an archivist almost.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's like a historian, archivist.
Yeah, archivist is like been in combat zones basically.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. So then, what were like when you started? What years was that? How long did it take? I mean, because you like so you went from your buddies, the podcast, to kind of this evolution to where it is now. I mean, you've also got your account nuked. You're already like up, up into 100,000 again. But like you're pretty known within the community, especially capturing stories. Like you're honestly the other than Tales from the Grid Score, which is the paranormal UFO.
He and I are like the OG online story gatherers.
Exactly. I honestly don't know if there's any. Maybe there are others out there, but you and Nick are the only ones that I know of.
As far as like the extent that we do,
exactly,
I think he and I are the only ones who consistently are gathering stories.
Yeah,
so this started all in 2018 was the podcast, and then the end of March 2018.
Yeah,
and then like by the end of that year, like maybe a year exactly afterwards, like it was dead. It was dead in the water, and then I started interviewing a lot of like GWAT guys, Vietnam veterans, and the first sit down interview I ever did was. I'll never get this opportunity again. And I kick myself in the ass for it all the time. But it was with a German veteran of the Battle of Stalingrad. And so for people who don't know about that, how rare this opportunity was 90,000 German soldiers surrendered at the end of the battle, and only 5,000 made it out of captivity, like a decade later. And this guy just happened to live just down the road from me in my hometown my entire life. Like his son is a tattoo artist. He tattooed the EGA on my back.
No shit.
Yeah. And so Mr. Meckling was a German veteran of the Battle of Stalingrad. I talked to him like literally 20 days before he died.
Yeah.
And I asked all the wrong questions.
Yeah.
Because I'd never done that before. I'd never sat with someone face to face and asked them the questions that like really mattered. I was like, "Oh, were you scared?" Of course he was scared, but let's talk about more like what scared you. What did it feel like? To be scared in different situations? Like, how did you handle that fear? It was very like fifth grader school newspaper type of interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first sit down interview, and I just did a horrible job of it. I still got like a page and a half worth of like really usable stuff that I'm going to put in my next book, but I'll never get that opportunity again.
Yeah,
and I'm so sad about it.
Yeah. Well, but like I said, that's a live and learn moment.
It is.
Yeah. Because I think for me, my thing that you're doing, which was I had that idea probably 10 years ago, but it wasn't. It was before. I mean, like Instagram was a thing, but none of it like what we know now.
Yeah.
I was sitting in with I think it was like 2011 or 2012, and my grandfather was a Korean veteran. And I remember somebody had, at the time there was like some interviews going around, like documentaries, but I remember like somebody telling me, because I wanted to be like a filmmaker, and I had not known shit about filmmaking other than like being the guy that loves movies and like understands everything without doing it, like kind of thing. I never really touched a filmmaking camera at that point. Like, other than in high school, I'd make my own short films, but it's just different. It's just like I never did like official stuff. And, so I wanted to sit down with him and just like interview him to get his stories on Korea, or at least get his time in the Marines. And that's one thing I was like, man, I always wish I would have just sat down, because he was a quiet guy. He didn't talk about any of it. And then the only times he did talk a little bit about it was the only time me and my brother, the only ones he talked to, because he was Marines. We were Marines. So he would like talk with us. That was it, and it was all small, short things here and there. And then he got Parkinson's and whatnot. So it was kind of like, man, that sucked. Like, I kind of wish I would have done that too. It was just sit down and like, and I would think too hard about it. Sometimes I was like, oh, I got to get a camera together. I got the audio. It's like, you just sat there and like hit record on an audio recorder to get the interview, just to get it done.
And it's all important.
Yeah. Oh
too.
Yeah.
Like that's another thing that I think is rather unique about what I do is I'll also document secondhand stories from a generation later.
Yeah.
Because like the only stories that I have, one of the big motivators for me is I don't have any stories from my grandfather. He was a British veteran who fought in Burma during the Second World War, and like the shit he must have seen, like fighting with the Gurkhas against the Japanese, like God only knows what he saw.
Yeah.
And I know nothing other than he was with the Gurkhas. He went to the grave with all of his stories.
Yeah.
But there's so many like guys you're my age who have stories from their grandpas who have now passed away.
Yeah.
Right. And so those stories are only going to last so long unless you write them down. And so I will accept, secondhand stories of like, hey, my grandpa served 1942, 1945. This is what he said in his words, the best I can recollect it.
Yeah.
And some historians like are going to like scoff at that and be like, oh, that's not firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no documentation evidence for that. And it's like, well, fuck off. Like, this isn't for you. This is for like the families and people who are interested.
Yeah. Well, even the history though, I mean, like, you're gonna look back on the amount of information you have to go look back at stuff now. I mean, and I think too, even with the dawn of I don't say the internet, but it is on the dawn of information. Like even now, things are like, you can read books and like even going to Ukraine and like the way they view Russians compared to like we grew up in the West, in the U.S., like Nazis are the worst, Russians are our friends. But once you get a little older, you start and they're like, wait, then they switched, now they're enemies in the Cold War. They kind of like learn that like they were never really our friends, but they were, enemy of our enemy enough to like fight the Germans and the Ukrainians. And then you start going in deep into Eastern Bloc history, which is a whole nother animal. Yeah. Of like, just because they were Soviets doesn't mean they liked Soviet Russia. They were, murdered and massacres and genocides, Ukrainians and Polish and like all before the Nazis got there. So it's like, when people start talking about, well, some of the Ukrainians, or when they have, when they talk about like some of the Nazi stuff, you're like, or whatever, or even that the whole country's made of Nazis, or, in the beginning, that's what they were trying to do. They're like, well, there's like these guys and they're and it's like, well, no, that's not true. But secondly, they don't view the Nazis as like how we view them. Like they fought the Russians. So that therefore Nazis are actually more aligned with some of their history fighting Russians, because they hate Russians. It's just like you don't understand the extent that they hate Russians. Like it's a whole thing. And people, if you're not from the area, you don't understand that, or you don't quite understand context.
Yeah, people tend to look at the world through their perspective.
Exactly.
It's like us looking at like the founding fathers through the perspective of someone from 2024. It's like, they had some questionable ways of living, but like this is a different world. Like you weren't there. Like right and wrong in that society was different. And it's the same in other parts of the world right now. Like in India, like I could marry a 14-year-old. Yeah. I would never. But like, it's like, but like in India, I could do that. That's right and wrong there, and it's completely okay. Yeah, so like, a lot of it is just perspective on just understanding people view things differently than you. Yeah, and that's the difficulty with today.
What I'm saying is like, even what you're doing with archiving, it's like these stories can help piece things together too. Like especially if there's like somewhat dates that can get associated to it, and then. And just for the few, I mean, like, so the generations are gone now. There's plentiful books on World War II, and but it's still not the individual account. It's always like the grand sweeping accounts.
Yeah, Big Blue Arrow.
Big Blue Arrow. And then it's like, and then everyone, Vietnam, I think you probably start getting more of the individual stories of guys, because it starts getting muddled. There is no like big sweep throughs. It's all these skirmishes and giant battles by all means. Not anything small, but it's definitely much more isolated stories and incidents. People weren't together with their unit for 3 years. They were there for a year, and then everyone's dying around them, and it's completely different fighting. So you start seeing just people just writing about their own experiences, and I think that's pretty cool, because then it does open that door of like, okay, this is what was actually like on the ground, not just a grand sweeping arrow.
That's what I've always been more interested in. Like you read history books and stuff like that, and a lot of it is just Big Blue Arrow, this is where the army went. What was it like on the ground? That's what I'm more interested in. Like people all the time on Instagram or YouTube will ask me what I think about like overarching stuff. And it's like, honestly, I don't really care all that much. I'm just more concerned about what it's like to be a person who's living through that. Yeah. Because that's what I'm interested in, is the extremes of the human experience in war. That's my passion, is documenting that. Yeah. And, sometimes the best you can get is just a story from a grandson that he heard from his grandpa. And then even then, that's a great motivator for other people to reach out to. Like I've gotten a lot of like good stories from like secondhand sources. And then people who read that will like submit like a letter that their grandpa wrote or something like that. Like I just did a big push for like World War II veterans like 3 weeks ago. And I got like 10 pages of letters that this Australian veteran wrote home during the Battle of Gallipoli in World War
Wow.
One, and it was just sitting in this guy's drawer.
Yeah.
You know, and he read
scanned
that.
it and then
he just scanned it and sent it over. And it's like, this is incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's sitting on like a historical gold mine
Yeah.
of experience. You know, talking about like how the Turks really aren't those bad guys. You know,
yeah.
You know, like they shoot us, we shoot them, but they're all right blokes. You know,
they're
like
all
stuff.
yeah.
Just stuff like that's crazy. Like to be able to like share that with people.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. Well, you're going to dig it after we're done with this. I'll show you my grandfather's map that they gave him.
I would love to see that.
From World War II. Yeah. No, so I think it's fun. We'll start with the old stuff because I think it's, so what is I would say the stories that stand out to you the most, but like, I guess like maybe the most impact and the most interesting, like you said that, you know, I know you have a few of I think cause you never hear from it, like, but then from the Nazi German perspective, like you've interviewed a few grandkids, but then there's like, what's the stories there? Because we never hear that side of the story.
So I got a couple really interesting interviews from German veterans, either like that they have told to their families or that they have written down in a diary somewhere like that. One that comes to mind right away is a guy who, to my knowledge, is still alive. He was part of the Hitler Youth in Berlin at the end of the war. Ended up, it was like him and his little brother. So they were 10 and like 8 with like Panzerfaust, you know, shooting T-34s and stuff like that. And they had lost the war, obviously. And then the bulk of the story is talking about how much of a struggle it was to live in Germany after the war. And the guy wrote down the story about how he and his little brother broke onto a Soviet train because they knew there would be food on there. And then like one of the guards caught them and was beating the little brother. And then the older brother, the guy who wrote the story, stabs him in the back. And then he was like, there's still one more Nazi in Berlin, you know? And this guy is still a guy, like to my knowledge, who was still like Heiling Hitler to his dying breath. He was one of those guys.
It's like hardcore, yeah.
Yeah, like a hardcore Nazi. But that's crazy. You know, like picture being 10 years old during the Battle of Berlin, just shooting T-34 tanks.
Yeah.
Another one was Mr. Meckling, you know, just talking about his experiences in Stalingrad, just like how they would like walk the line in the mornings after night, and like 1 in 6 guys would just be frozen solid.
Jeez.
You know, and it would be like that every day. And it's just so interesting to think about what that must have been like. And I got a taste of it interviewing Ukrainians in Azovstal. You know, I got that feeling of what it must have been like to be encircled, slowly starving, freezing, just morale is just out the window, you know. And interviewing the Germans or documenting their stories is always kind of a thrill for me because it's a side you never hear about.
Yeah.
You know, like we've seen like plenty of movies and books from our perspective, but you don't hear too much about the Germans. Because they're the bad guys, you know. Like one of my favorite miniseries is it's called Generation War, and it's like Band of Brothers, but from the German perspective.
Really?
Yeah, you should.
Is it a German show or is it?
Yeah, it's a German show,
okay.
And it's like I think it's like 3 episodes or something like that. Each episode is like an hour and a half long, and it's incredible. It's like this. These 2 brothers, one of them is an officer who had like fought in France and stuff like that, and the other one's like this scared little boot. And they like kind of end up switching roles of how the little brother becomes like this total badass during the Battle of Kursk and all that stuff. It's absolutely fantastic. You should definitely watch it. Well, it used to be on Netflix.
Oh, okay. Check it out.
But yeah, the Germans, there's another story I was thinking about. Losing my train of thought here. Oh, there was a German paratrooper who is fighting in Italy, who was comparing his experience to like his like level of combat experience to the level of combat experience of the Americans. And he was just saying like all around we are just better soldiers than they are.
Than the Germans? Like in World War II?
In World War II.
Really?
So this...
That's surprising because I've always heard the Germans were like a little more better trained.
He was saying from his perspective,
as
like a German paratrooper at the Battle of Monte Cassino, he thought they were better soldiers than the Americans. He's like, their advantage is just material.
Oh, okay.
You know, like they've got endless artillery, airstrikes, naval cannons, whatever. And he's like, but like as far as like soldiering, like we are much better than they are, but he still said like he had a respect for the Americans down the hill because it's like it's got to be rough getting slaughtered every day.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like they still came up every single day, and it's cool to see how like the bad guys, you know, are still human beings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they still feel fear, they still feel courage, happiness, love, same things we do. You know.
Yeah.
But seeing him respect an enemy, it's just you don't see too much of that, especially in like modern warfare. Like you'd never hear like a Ukrainian and a Russian like saying they respect each other.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these thoughts come afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's like the 3 German stories that I've really found that I really liked.
Yeah. That's nuts though. That's pretty wild. I mean, like, so that one guy, like the one that you did interview, how was it like I don't know if the questions you did ask, but what did he mention all? What was like coming to the U.S. after World War II? You know, like he's, you know, he fought the U.S., you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, now he's like, I'm dying here, like, you know, on U.S. soil.
So he had pretty like warm feelings to the United States because like he had surrendered to the Soviets and he spent like a long time as a prisoner of war.
Okay.
And then when he got out, he didn't realize that his whole family was dead.
Oh, really?
Like his sister was dead, his brother was dead, and his parents were dead. And he didn't like know that until he was released in like 1954 or something like that. And so he was like, there's nothing for me in Germany.
Yeah.
You know, and so he'd heard about all these Germans who had gone to the United States. He packed up, moved to Minnesota, like somewhere near here, you know?
Yeah.
And then
Northeast.
Yeah.
I mean, Northeast is like German territory.
And then
or used to be.
And then moved to my hometown, raised a family there, and been there ever since.
Yeah.
He was just nice old Mr. E. Never knew he was this like badass German veteran who had been in street battles.
What's that? I wonder what the conversation's like in the bar trying to pick up chicks. You know what I mean? Like,
like he's collecting the veterans benefits, for he's going to get his free meal at Applebee's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
he's like, I was on the other side. But, I'm still a veteran.
Yeah, it was World War II. It's World War II. Let's not get specific.
Yeah.
Well, even back in the 50s, if he's like coming over, like starts a family, like what's that conversation like? Unless there's other Germans there.
Yeah, there's like a lot of Germans in the Midwest.
Okay.
So like,
that's true.
It was probably pretty easy for him to assimilate.
German population.
And then he was a farmer, so it's like spending all his time on a farm anyway.
Exactly. So. Yeah. It's kind of it's funny to think about that when, I think the funny joke is all the high ranking Nazis go to like don't ask an Argentinian why they're blonde or blue haired. You know what I mean? Like that there's like way too much. And by the way, I want to go down there. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I guess there's just a bunch of like blonde Argentinians.
Yeah, well there's like a community though. So it's not just like, oh, there's some random like there's like a town that like celebrates Germany. Like it's like I don't remember what it's called, but that I've heard of it. Basically, there's like a community of like former Nazis. That,
there's all
it's like
descendants of SS war
pretty
criminals.
much. Yeah. It's like there was actually my wife. It's hilarious. One of her old coworkers, her son, the coworker's son, was getting married to an Argentinian, but she was like a U.S. Argentinian or whatever. But she was like blonde hair, blue eyed. And I was like, are you serious? And Amanda goes, yeah. And I go,
what's his last name?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or no, what's hers? So it was her. And so it was like, and she was like, yeah, it's kind of weird. I was like, do you know why she's blonde hair, blue eyed and Argentinian? She's like, no. And I was like, because a lot of the Nazis escaped and went to Argentina. And she's like, oh my God. And then Amanda didn't ask or something. She goes, but then she came back. She goes, yeah, they just don't talk about that side of the family.
Funny you bring that up. So years ago when I was single, I met this girl on Tinder and I was kind of like seeing her a little bit.
Yeah.
And we got on the conversation of, military history being me. Mm-hmm. And I asked her if she had anyone in her family who fought in the Second World War. Turns out I never connected the dots, because I thought, what are the odds?
Yeah.
Her one of her I don't remember what the relation was, but she was related to Rudolf Hess, like Adolf Hitler's right-hand man.
Holy shit.
The guy who flew to Britain to try to negotiate a peace deal between Germany and Britain against Hitler's wishes. So Hitler kind of disowned him after that, but he was in the Nuremberg trials and all that stuff. But yeah, her last name was Hess. I never connected the dots that they could be related. And she's like, yeah, that's like my something. We don't really talk about it, but I'm related to him.
Yeah, we don't really talk much about it.
Yeah, I thought that was fucking crazy.
Yeah.
What are the odds? I'm dating a celebrity.
Yeah. I always love the joke that Dwight has on on The Office. He goes, I was trying to visit my extended family down in Argentina, but the Shoah Foundation protested it. And it's such a deep joke that unless you like know,
unless you get it,
you're like, what are you talking about?
Some good like history nerd.
Yeah,
joke
exactly.
Right
Like, I was laughing my ass off when I remember hearing about that. No, so you got the World War II aspect. So is there any other ones that kind of like stuck out to you that like, hey, these are stories that just aren't heard? Like Japanese or even like Russians and, you know, in the, like I said, Burma, like people don't really talk about Burma much. You know, you had the war in the Pacific with the Marines, but you don't hear much about Burma or like any of these other spots. I mean, is there some I don't say exotic places, but exotic wars that, or battles that you're like, holy shit, like I didn't even know this was a thing, but it was such a crazy story that just sticks out to you?
Yeah, one that comes up in mind right away was one I just documented recently. It was from a Marine raider on Guadalcanal, and it's literally just like 2 lines in his diary, and it was like 46 days in the jungle, 5 Marines killed, like 65 Japs killed, and that was the whole diary entry. I was like, holy shit! Like, imagine that's all you've got to say. Like, what kind of guy are you where you spend like 46 days in the jungle?
Also, that's specific too, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I did patrols in Iraq where I was like, I think I'm on day 4 of like it's like time blends together, you know? And you're just like, oh, I'm on day 46 and we killed this many guys.
Yeah, he's like 46 days in the jungle, like ex-Marines dead, shit tons of Japs dead.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all you've got to say. Like, what kind of man are you where that's all you think is like warranted to write down? And I just like that to me is like the greatest generation.
Yeah.
Like that, like
just get it done.
Just get it done. Those like 3 lines, like what I felt, how I'm feeling is not important. This is what happened. Like we did the job.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's fucking awesome.
Do you hear more? And I got to dive more into this. I got to read obviously the Pacific book, but I remember hearing, and this, I don't want to say it's hearsay, but I remember, and I don't know, maybe you come across this, so it's where the history of the Pacific, they watered it down because of how rough it was compared to the European theater, like with how brutal the Japanese were, and the Marine, like
I could see that
they like watered it down in the 50s. Apparently, it took a little while for them to kind of like, not that they suppressed it, but they just didn't talk about it. Like the European theater, like, oh, it went through, you know, it's a different culture. Like Japanese were like, you know, they were like, suicidal, the kamikazes, but they were cutting dudes' dicks off.
Jungle fighters.
Yeah, jungle fighters, but they like the horrific shit they did to the U.S. and the Marines were like, fuck you too. And so it was this back and forth of like just savagery and carnage that you never really heard about it till, not say recently, but it took a while, I think, for it to get out that like, they were stringing up Marines and like cutting their dicks off and throwing it in their mouth and stuff. Like it was like stuff that you're like, oh my God, did that happen? And like guys were like, yeah, that happened. You know, like it was nuts.
It reminds me, I think it was Voices of the Pacific by Adam Makos, which was a big inspiration for me, by the way, to do B&B, because it's just a bunch of little anecdotes. I think there's a story in that book that goes over that of I think it was Guadalcanal, and it was like the Japanese and the Americans were separated by a river, and then the Marines had like severed Japanese heads on sticks, and some like major comes walking by and he's like, "What the hell are you? You're supposed to be Marines." And then the Marines are like, "This is what Marines do."
Yeah.
You know, like those guys across the river, they got to be scared of us.
Yeah.
You know, and this is what scares them.
Yeah.
Sort of stuff. And so I think Dan Carlin puts it so well that the war in Europe against the Germans was a war. The Pacific was a horror movie.
Yeah.
You know, because you got to think like you're sitting in a fighting hole at night. And there's another story. I don't remember what island it was. I think it was Peleliu, I think. There's the guy submitted a story that his grandpa had wrote where he was in a fighting hole at night. You know, they were paired up, and then they heard like struggling off to the hole on their right. And then they heard like footsteps running around, and they didn't know who it was, you know, because you're not supposed to get out of your holes because you're going to get shot. And so they spent like 20 minutes listening to the struggle go on like 15 meters from them. And they're calling out to their buddy, like, "Hey, are you okay?" And like it's still going on. And then at the end of it, he's like, "Yeah, like I don't remember the guy's name. He's like, something is dead, but I got 2 of them, you know." And it's like, how fucking scary has that got to be where you can't see shit at night? You're just in your fighting hole with your buddy. And the Japanese loved night infiltration. Yeah. And they loved bayonet fighting and knife fighting. Yeah. And so just like that knowledge alone, like if you put me in a time machine and I'm back on Peleliu or Guadalcanal or Okinawa, wherever, I'm a Marine on those islands, like nighttime specifically is when I'm going to be scared. Yeah, yeah. Because that to me is like one of my worst nightmare scenarios is not being able to see. And there's guys who are actively like excited to come fucking stab me to death. That's horrifying. Yeah. And speaking on that, there's a diary entry that got sent to me on Facebook a couple years ago. And it was from a descendant of a Japanese soldier. And he sent me like pictures of the diary and stuff. So I know he didn't just like fucking make it up. Yeah. I mean, the guy probably, I might have, who knows? That's the part of the danger of doing this job, You can't verify everything. But it was the diary entry of a Japanese soldier fighting in Burma. And this is to this day, like one of the only stories I've gotten from the Japanese perspective, but it's like a 5-page letter that this guy had written. Yeah. It's very descriptive, and he goes about talking how they were going up to like a British camp to ambush it. And one of the lines in it was so, I think about it all the time, where he was like shooting at British soldiers. He was like standing behind some barrels, and he was shooting at British soldiers running out of tents, and he was like scared of the rifle kind of because he's like a Japanese conscript, it's just like a 17-year-old that got put in uniform and shipped off to Burma. And so he's like trying to shoot these British soldiers, but he keeps flinching. And so he's like, instead of like shooting him in the chest where he's aiming, he's like shooting them in the legs and then like the groin and stuff like that. And then he said when the British started returning fire, he wrote in his diary, it was this moment I realized I was protected only by valiant youth alone. So it's like kind of that highlights that mentality of like, when you're young, you think nothing will happen to you. It's always, it'll happen to somebody else, somebody else will get hit. I'll be okay. Yeah. And that was like his moment where it's like, oh fuck, I might die here. Yeah. And that was really interesting. And then later on, he talks about how they climbed up some trees and ambushed a bunch of British soldiers again, patrolling through the jungle. And a bunch of them had surrendered or were wounded, something like that. And so the officer said, we can't take prisoners. We're going to have to kill them all. And so they were going to shoot them. And the officer's like, no, I'll do it. And he pulls out his, like, not like a katana sword, but like the knife version of it. And he would like stand on their backs and push the blade through their ears. And he did that to all the British soldiers. And then he said that he went and peed on a rubber tree or something after that. And he's like, all right, let's go. Jesus. And it's like he just killed like 15 guys, like executed them. Yeah. And like no one said a word about it. And that's just like the mentality and like the ability to do cruelty to other people. Like just imagine just shoving a knife through like 10 guys' heads. Yeah. And like that's it. And that's like standard. That was it. And everyone's just standing there. He's like, "No, I'll do it." Yeah. It's
standard SOP. Like, hey, this is right in the book.
You got wounded or prisoners? Yeah, we'll just stab a knife through the head.
Yeah. It's got like those weird graphs of like A to B, like how you dig a fighting hole. Like stick it in their ear and just push it in. Like that's wild. That's some wild shit. So then, like the World War II stuff. Then is there? I remember you talk about the Marine side of the house. The guys like they were using flamethrowers. I think it was. I think I think you interviewed somebody that had either flamethrowers or there was like they wouldn't give up or something like that. Oh no, that's what the war had ended, and they were going to like they were like doing cleanup or something like that. And there's some guys that were still pockets of dudes that were still like weren't surrendering or something like that.
Oh, I remember that's in my first book. Yeah. It doesn't involve a flamethrower, but they would have to go around the islands. They literally called them like a Jap hunting team. Yeah. And they'd find like these Japanese camps and encircle them and just like
do call outs or something.
Yeah. And they'd be like, hey, like come out and surrender. And if they didn't surrender, they would just shoot them all. Yeah. And the guy talks about like the horrible fucking PTSD this gave him. And he's like writing about it in this diary. He's talking about how the VA was like, this doesn't appear service connected, because it was like, I guess after the war, like this took part, like these killings happened like after the Japanese had surrendered. Yeah. And so the VA was like, no, it's not service connected. Yeah. And he was talking about like blowing people's heads apart with like Thompson submachine guns and like the way like you can hear like bones snap like as you shoot them. It's just like a horribly like gruesome account of like close range like jungle killing.
So they're still fighting. Like, so the war is over. They're going out to these camps like, war is over, homie.
Not all the Japanese surrendered.
No,
like, there was Hiro
Again,
Onoda.
you don't hear those type of stories.
Yeah,
like,
there's Hiro Onoda, the Japanese guy, didn't surrender to like the 70s.
Yeah, that well, everyone thinks of him. Yeah, but then it's like,
but there were like thousands after the war.
Yeah, and how would that suck too?
Who
if you're
didn't
like,
know the war had ended because they just got left on these islands.
Yeah.
Or they had heard and just refused to surrender.
Yeah. Well, it sucked though if you're like a Marine that like lived through all of it and then you die after the war ended,
the fact,
getting in firefights with these fucking assholes.
Like,
I'd be so pissed.
Imagine how your family would feel too.
Yeah.
Like they
it's
hear
over.
the war's over, like, oh, he'll be home soon.
Yeah.
And then a month later, he died in combat against the Japanese. It's like, what?
Like months later.
Yeah.
Or, you're just like, what the fuck? I thought the war was over. Like, I don't know. They're still duking it out out there. That's so wild.
Yeah.
See, again, these things that no one talks about, like, unless you're like a super history buff. I think it's becoming maybe more common knowledge with Instagram or even like say your accounts, but like in general, I think it's just the access of information. Like, oh, do you hear about this moment in history or something like that? Like way more stuff, which is, I understand they don't tell us that in school or like high school. It's like there's so much to learn in generalities.
Like,
you have
social
to do
media does a good
too.
job of like giving stuff exposure.
Yeah.
Like the Rhodesian Bush War, for example.
Yeah, let's
like
talk about
everyone
that.
knows
The Cold War Rhodesian Bush.
Everyone knows like the Rhodesian camo.
Yeah.
Or like knows a little bit about it. And that's such a like an obscure, weird African war. But because like the camo that they wore is like super sick and badass, like everyone like who knows anything about like military history knows a little bit about that war. And that's all because of the internet.
Yeah. But, well, then I remember, well, it's not the Rhodesian Bush War, it's a little bit, but the executive outcomes and the Blood Diamonds, I think I'm in a
Facebook group of veterans of executive outcomes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to talk to them. Something. Have you talked to them?
I mean, there's nothing really. It's like a dead Facebook group, and they're very much like the boomer generation, where they're just like sharing like AI generated images of like.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? It's like that, and it's just weird to see like these badass guys sharing like a picture of like, look at this sandcastle this kid made, and it's 4 stories tall, and they're all like, wow. Amazing. It's like, how do I tell them?
How do you tell them it's not real?
How do I tell them it's not real?
But the Rhodesian Bush War, have you like talked with veterans from that?
A couple. Rhodesia and the Angolan Bush War as well. It's like the South African border war.
So what do they have to say about all that stuff? Because like it's not quite known. Like you said, you've heard of it, but I like watched a YouTube video. I'm like, what the fuck was that war about? Like I watched like a overview. Like
and it's hard to explain what that is, but I will say like speaking with that veteran community is very difficult because they all feel like no one gives a shit. Yeah. So like I was in a bunch of like Facebook groups of veterans of like the Angolan Bush War, the Rhodesian Bush War, stuff like that. And I'll occasionally put like a post on there like, hey, I'm a journalist. I'm looking for stories. And like 95% of the responses on there are like, why should I tell you my story when no one cares? Like our country didn't care about us after the war was over. We were just thrown away, forgotten about. Like what makes you think that we want to tell our story? Why would we contribute more? Yeah, sort of stuff. And so it's very difficult to get them to talk. And so like all the interviews I've gotten or stories that have been submitted have been through families. Yeah. So it's like a son or a grandson is like, hey, grandpa, or hey, dad, like you should really like write this down and stuff like that. So I've gotten a couple through that, and it's a very like most of it is like a low kinetic war where like most of the people who participated like maybe heard a shot in anger. Kind of like my era of the GWAT, where it's like 1 in 50 infantrymen heard an IED go off 10 miles away.
Exactly, because it sounds like, I remember watching the video on it, it was like there's a few big raids that the Rhodesians were good at.
So like the Celis Scouts, they were like great at bushcraft, and they had these helicopters that would like drop them off. Yeah. They'd go like kill a bunch of terrorists. Yeah. Get back on the bird and fly away. They did counterinsurgency really well. Yeah. Yeah. They were really good at it too. Like they used like the FAL or the SLR or whatever it's called. Like the baby poop camo painted on it. Yeah, yeah. But I've got a couple stories. One of them was a guy who was a medic in the I don't remember which war. It was the Angolan Bush War or the Rhodesian, one of the two. But he was talking about how this guy had stepped on a landmine, and so he put him in the truck that they're going to drive him back in.
Yeah.
And it was just trying to keep this guy alive for like a day.
Yeah.
You know, because they were like way out in the bush, and they have to like drive this guy back. And the story was mostly about this guy like talking to him and trying to keep the casualty like from giving up, basically.
Yeah.
Because he got like both his legs blown off.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a lot like, it reminds me a lot of the stories of most people from the GWAT.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's some shots from the bushes. You don't really know where it came from. Everyone returned fire. It lasted 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Both sides kind of go their own way, and then they kind of deal with it mentally in different ways. And so that's what talking to like the Rhodesian and the Angolan guys is like most of the time for me. Once the war in Ukraine ends, whenever that does, I want to put a lot more effort into these like niche wars, like Rhodesia, Angola, Burma is another one. I've done nothing for Burma, and that's been a war that's been going on for like half a decade now.
Yeah, well, more than that, it's the longest long-running civil war in the world, or not in the
Shows
world.
how much I know.
Yeah. No, I talked with Luke Ryan about it, and we were trying to maybe cover a story for Vet TV on it. Or it's one of the ones that we could do, but it takes so long to get in and out. Like I don't know if I can cover it. Just
you gotta do like an illegal border crossing.
You do, yeah. You got to go to like Thailand, and then you got to know the people to go in, and then it's like just to basically the travel to get where we were needed to go. It would take us. I think it was going to take us like a week or something.
Because I'd consider,
and then we got to be there like to film for 2 weeks. You know,
have to be there
like,
a while.
Yeah, he's like,
it's not a very kinetic war, so it's
No.
like there could be like weeks where nothing happens.
Yeah, and we would try to interview the people doing stuff. So it's not, we're not so much getting the kinetics of it. It's almost getting like the stories of what's going on. But yeah, it was going to be at least a 3-week trip, like at least, you know. And I'm like, well, and that's on a good. That's on a good note. That's like if we got in within 4 days, we got, you know, because then it takes like 2-3 days of travel where we're going, and then you're there, and you got to travel back, and you got to cry. It's like a whole fucking.
We're just so spoiled.
Yeah.
With Ukraine.
Yeah.
You know, it takes like 2 days in.
Yeah.
You can go straight to the front line, film all the combat you want.
Yeah.
Leave. You know?
I know that's the thing too. Is like I want to go back. Obviously, we gotta have another good story to go back to convince my wife. There's gotta be funds behind it, but it's one of those things too of like what you did in Kherson. Like I'd love to do, or take a look at Cherniv, or take a look at some of these other places. Kursk. Well, Kursk is a lot. I don't say Kursk is not settled down, but it's definitely like not what it was when we were there. They had just pushed like that night. They had pushed into Kursk when we were in Izium, so it was like. It was Wild West. Like they're like they don't want to let anybody up there because that could be bad news bears no matter how you spin it. But yeah, it's just like one of those things where you're like, okay, cool. But to cover all that stuff, you know, I mean, these guys are, you know, it's funny too because I don't know if Chris is gonna. We'll see what we do, but you know, like Chosen Company's like, well, if you want to train, and they're like, if you want to come on a raid, like you know, they're like, you can come, like you know, and obviously those are all Western guys and stuff like that, but. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, capturing those. But have you run into anything from the past that's like, because you said you've been capturing these stories, like just a really fucking weird, out of the blue war that's just like, or conflict that's popped up that's just like out of left field, you know, like in the Cold War, something weird. You know what I mean? I mean, because, you know, you think about like, you know, I don't know about it's like the Balkans. Like I don't know fuck all about the Balkans.
Dude, I went down a rabbit hole last year. I had like this weird. You know how people like get on like a food kick where like all they want to eat for like a week is Chinese food. Like, my fiance eats Mexican food. Like that's all she wants to eat for like a week out of the month. Yeah. For me, that's like different wars. Like, so there'll be like 2.5, like 3/4 of the month I'm just Ukraine.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like a week where I get deep into something. But last year I got way into like the breakup of Yugoslavia.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like Googling that war. There's no straight answer to like the split, like the Bosnian war, right? Yeah. There's no like
we were involved in Bosnia. I mean, like we had sent troops into Bosnia. Right?
Yeah, like NATO, and we bombed like Belgrade and stuff like that. But
yeah.
like it's such a complex and nuanced series of wars because like you can, because it's like I don't know how many. You know, I still can't coherently explain what it is.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed like 15 people
Yeah.
who've been involved. But it's like, how do I describe this? I went down a deep rabbit hole, and mostly it was around people living in Sarajevo during the siege.
Yeah.
And it was, I got a really good talk with this guy who was like a kid during it. And he remembers like artillery coming down and like having to run it. There's this street called Sniper Alley where like Serb snipers would be sitting and they would just shoot everybody.
Yeah.
You know, like you'd be walking down the street, they just shoot you. Kid, dog, old man, granny, doesn't matter. They would just shoot you. And that's one of those wars that I think it was the longest siege in history.
Yeah.
Too. Someone's gonna get upset
Yeah.
with that. They're gonna be like, well, actually, in in 854, there was a siege in Southeast China. At least in modern history that I'm aware of, it's the longest siege, or maybe it's Lenin or whatever.
Yeah.
But like the city was just shelled to fuck, and not quite as bad as like Bakhmut is today. Like most of Sarajevo is still like standing at the end of it. But just talking to the soldiers on each side of a past war that is still like they're in their like 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
The people who were in that war, so they're still pretty young, and like the memories are still very like vivid.
Yeah.
I spoke to one guy. So this is how like nuanced and like difficult it is to like try to explain this war. I don't even remember which side he was on. Yeah. Because of how similar the stories are and how myriad of other reasons. There's like 10,000 stories around my head. But there's like a trench line, and he was going to do like a recon mission on the trench line, and he like ended up leaving a note for the enemy to being like, we're watching you, something like that. And then the next day he woke up, and then there was a note in front of their trench saying, we're watching you also. Yeah. And it's just like, I was like shit texting before like it was a thing. You know, as it like the Bosnian War, all those like wars and the breakup of Yugoslavia were fucking horrible. You know, it's like for civilians and soldiers. There was like, there's this lady I talked to where her mom had a grenade in the kitchen cabinet, and it was her dad had given them the grenade in case the Serbs took the village, and the grenade was to kill their whole family. Yeah. Because like if the Serbs got a hold of them, like you were better dead. You're better dead. Sort of thing. So that's like the kind of vibe that war was. And they're like concentration camps. Yeah. Like there's pictures of them where it looks like it's a picture from like 1944, but it was like 1993 or 94, something like that. And then the Chechen War is another niche war that I've really invested a lot of time into for interviewing people. But that's a really hard community to speak with, because there's two groups of people. There's the Chechens, and then there's the Russians. And neither one are very friendly speaking to Americans right now. Or ever. You know? So every story I've gotten from either side of that has been through family who know me personally or have heard of me and read my stuff online, and they're like, hey, this guy's like good to go. You should like talk to him, or you should submit a story, stuff like that. And I've gotten some really like traumatic shit that happened to people on both sides. Yeah. Well,
the Chechen War, we had heard about just because when we fought in Iraq, we had Chechen snipers. But at the same point, though, which is wild, is that there, and I don't know a ton about the history of that, but there was a guy that we interviewed that was Chechen, he was Czechoslovakian. But there are also Chechens that fight for Ukraine, or and then there's the Chechens that fight on behalf of the Russians, and like there's this whole and the Chechens, I think what the Ukrainians are taking note from the Chechens was that they beat Russia. They signed that peace agreement. Russia backs off and then reinvades and slaughters everybody. And I think that's just something that's something that Russia does. So it's like when people start talking about, well, ceasefire or peace deal, it's like, no, they're just going to regroup.
It's like we saw what happened to Grozny.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what happens when you sign a peace deal with the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, which is wild, because I remember hearing about Chechnya and like, all that kind of stuff. And it's this, crazy war. Like I said, and how bloody it is. I know you got a few stories from that.
To start off with, if you haven't read it yet, you should read Arkady Babchenko's book, One Soldier's War. And he was like a 18-year-old conscript who got forced into the first Chechen War, and then he signed on again for the second one. And the hazing that goes on in the Russian army, in some cases, is probably worse than combat. Yeah. Like soldiers were like hazed to death, like pretty regularly. I don't remember what it's called, but there's like a word for it, where it's like the hazing of your by your elders and stuff like that. But his book is fantastic about describing like what real hell war is. I think they should make it into like a HBO miniseries. It's amazing. As far as I know, the author like lives in Kyiv now.
Yeah.
Like he's not he's like a, because the war, like his book like portrayed the Russian army so poorly, and like how the war was fought and stuff like that. Like there's like a hit out on him. But yeah, I've interviewed a couple. One story that I got, the story changed once halfway through, because he decided to tell the truth at the end, because his son had like read what I put on Facebook or something like that, and his son's like, that's not what happened. Yeah. So he made him talk to me again. But the story goes, they were in Grozny, and if you know like anything about Grozny, it was like Bakhmut before Bakhmut. This was the first Chechen war, and he was like on the second floor of like an old Soviet apartment, and then there was a couple Russian soldiers on the first floor. An RPG flew into the window on the first floor, so he went downstairs to check on them. There were like 2 wounded guys down there, and then in through the front door comes 2 Chechens, and he shoots the first one in the head. The brains of that first guy goes on to the second one, and then there's like a knife fight bayonet struggle in that doorway with the Chechen fighter and another Russian soldier. So he's still in the stairwell, and he's like backing up because he feels like more Chechens are about to come through if 2 already came in. And more came in. And the first way he told that story was he took aimed shots at the Chechens in the room. Because there's like, I get the way I picture it in my head is like a bar fight going on, where it's just Chechens and Russian soldiers intermingled in a fight. The truth of the story is that he panicked and just machine gunned all of them. Yeah. The whole room of people. And this guy felt horrible about that. Yeah. You know, and it's like,
well, yeah. I would imagine so. Yeah.
Killed like half a squad of your own guys.
Yeah.
But like I can understand the perspective of it. And he described like the sound of like a knife going through like a uniform, you know, like how our uniforms are, and like the Russians are, I assume, are pretty similar. But like he described like the sound of a knife like puncturing the uniform and human skin, and then like hitting a bone. Yeah. And the way he described it was like if you laid a tarp over like a leg of ham. Yeah. And stabbed it, he'd be like, that would be the exact same sound. Yeah. And just picturing that story in my head is just so fucked up. Yeah. And that happened regularly. Yeah. There's a story that I like to upload on Instagram every now and then. It's an audio recording of Russians talking on the radio. And it was this like Russian, I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but it was a Russian like battalion commander asking the other like platoon commanders where this BMP went that they sent to like reinforce a position. And then a Chechen answers the radio, and he's like, yo, you don't need to worry about them. And then he starts like laughing into the radio, and he's like, ha 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 ha, like for like 10 seconds. And it's just like such a creepy, because you can tell this is like a 19-year-old talking on the radio. Yeah. And it's like, so like you can only imagine what happened to those guys in that BMP. Yeah. Because the Russians were not, or the Chechens were not like cordial to their prisoners at all. Like there's plenty of, like the first person I ever saw die online was a Russian soldier getting beheaded in Chechnya. Yeah. And Arkady talks about it in his book, how a Russian soldier gets captured by the Chechens, and he's like 2 streets down from them, and he sees the Chechens like throw him into the road with his hands tied behind his back, and then they stab him in the neck and then just leave him there. And it takes like 10 minutes for the guy to die. And there's nothing they can do because he's like 2 streets away. They can't run out to get him because they'll get shot. So that there's nothing to do but just watch him bleed out. And like the way he describes the guy like struggle with his hands tied behind his back, it's like, it's so visceral. Yeah. And it's like that. The Chechen War really encapsulates for me, like before the war in Ukraine, it encapsulates for me personally, like the very worst parts of war. Because like you never hear I'm unaware of any happy ending of a story in the Chechen War.
Yeah.
There's another guy I talked to who was a Chechen fighter, and he talked about how his dad owned like a butchery, like a butcher's shop, and they were using that as like an ammo depot, and they went and grabbed a bunch of RPGs and like AK mags, and they're going to ambush this column of Russian soldiers down the road. This is like, I think it was like the Christmas Day massacre, like the day battle or the New Year's Eve battle. I don't remember. It was like 1994, 1995. But like all the Russians in the city got like wiped out. Like entire companies killed to the last man. And he talks about how like there's like this low-ish wall where like if you were standing up, you could see over it. But if you were like that, you couldn't. So like they could see the tops of the BMPs. And they like crouch walked behind this wall. And they came up right behind like a whole squad of Russians like clumped up behind this BMP. And he talks about how the guy in front of him fires his AK into all of their backs. And that the first thing he thought of when he heard them screaming was like someone slamming on piano keys. Because it's all just men of like different like tones in their voices screaming at the same time because they're all being shot in the back. And he said it sounded like someone slamming piano keys. That's what it reminded him of. And then they went right back to his dad's butcher shop, got more ammo, went and finished off the whole column.
No shit.
Yeah.
It's crazy to, it's like I said, I love talking with you about this because I think war, especially in the U.S., even the way that we're trained to do it, but the harshness of what's going on, especially with what's going on in Ukraine, like you kind of relate it back to that. It's like you understand like the cultures that come through, like you can talk about like obviously October 7th as well, but like in the Israeli Gaza war, Hamas, and Hezbollah, but like they don't. It's like most Americans because we're so separated from all of this. It's like you don't understand how, and like for us to experience war, even then we've experienced shit of it, but not to like we haven't seen like said that real visceral war, like really like guys stabbing your buddy and leaving them out in the fucking, like how insane that is, in Chechnya, like you heard about those battles and you're like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I think though too, like everyone has this, I don't want to say rose colored glasses with the Russians, but it's like, they're very harsh. You're like, even in their culture, like, you know what I'm saying is like when it comes to like war, the hazing aspect, it's just like, holy fuck. Like it's nuts, and like I said, guys will die. Like they don't respect human life like we do. I think that's really hard. Like when we fought in the GWAT, the Islamic extremists and the jihadists, like it's like hard for people to wrap their heads around that. Like you're willing to sacrifice your family and yourself. Like when kids die, they're like, good, they'll go to Allah, and then that helps our cause. Like people can't wrap their heads around that. And I think October 7th kind of blew that door open a little bit, where they're like, what the fuck's going on? Like, it's like you can't wrap your head around, like people try, they just don't understand it. And it's like, we go to Chechnya, like the Russians, like I said, that, like how brutal that is. Like there's no prisoners. No. I mean, there's no, like if you were to do that, you have U.S. and you're in the crazy battle, say the Battle of Russia and U.S. or whatever, or some craziness, and you did that, somebody, they'd be like, oh my God, war crimes. I mean, like they lost their minds over some of our scout snipers pissing on the body of Taliban.
That's a Tuesday
in
Ukraine.
Exactly.
That's like PG.
Yeah. Even the Taliban weren't even mad. They're like, why are you getting upset about this? Like their PR guy was back in like 2012 was like, what the fuck is wrong with it? Who cares?
It's different culture.
Yeah, exactly.
And like a Ukrainian put it very well in a way that I hadn't thought of it before. And he equated it to like just like a simple difference in society where it's like American rap versus Russian rap. And it was American rap is look what I've got. I've got all this money. I've got all this like these girls and these cars, and stuff like that. And Russian rap is I'm gonna take stuff from you. I'm gonna hurt you, and like just like but like in 1990, I think I'm accurate on this, but the average life expectancy for a Russian male was like 68.8. So like Russians have had hard lives.
Yeah,
like that. Like the average family in Russia takes home like $14,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not at all surprising to me that we see the stuff that's happening in Ukraine. Like there's this page on Reddit that like tracks Russian soldiers killed, like visually confirmed, you know, like Russian and Ukrainian losses. And then like there's someone else who like tracks war crimes and stuff like that. And it's like more Ukrainians have been executed at gunpoint in this war than like Americans died in the last 10 years of the GWAT.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a 2.5 year war that are executed on camera, right?
Camera.
So think of this,
Not
if it's
camera.
like, yeah, think of all the times that people don't have cameras.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm very well aware that like war crimes happen on both sides. The Russians are just a lot better at documenting it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Or just don't care.
or just don't care.
Yeah.
You know, because like society,
don't
right?
care.
Like they film like blowing this guy's head off, and then they send it to their families. Like, look how cool that was.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah.
Like, he was a Ukrainian Nazi.
Yeah.
You know, and they've had rough lives. Like like the men suffer like much higher rates of alcoholism. It's like 70% divorce rate, I think.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I know it's like
In
a very
Russia?
it's a very high divorce rate.
Yeah.
Men just don't live that long.
Yeah.
It's a tough fucking society.
Yeah.
And then most of the soldiers aren't from the nicer parts of Russia either. They're getting mobilized or conscripted or volunteering from like the poorer regions. I just did a story on B&B the other day about the Buryats. I think that's how you say it. They're like a Mongolian ethnic group that lives in Russia, and they die at like way higher rates than. It's something like if you're in St. Peter, like if you're from Moscow or St. Petersburg, you are 10 times less likely to die than someone from one of the republics that Russia rules over. So it's like if you're from Siberia, anywhere, like you're pretty much fucked.
Yeah. Because they'll probably send you to the front.
Yeah, because it's like,
yeah,
fuck you. You know?
Well, the other thing,
it's like why Wagner was just used like Wagner. I think they suffered something like 40,000 killed in Bakhmut, and they're just all prisoners. They're just meat waves.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of stories of people just talking. Like I've got pictures of fields of corpses. You know, this is like World War II, World War I level of like bodies.
Yeah.
You know, there's a video I uploaded on Instagram a couple months ago of this guy walking like 150 meters in a tree line, and if you count all the bodies he walks past, it's like 88 corpses.
No shit.
Like 88 guys in a tree line. It's like we can't fathom that.
No,
you know,
no,
if a Marine Corps company suffers 88 casualties, they're combat ineffective.
Well, wild bat. I mean, that'd be the biggest story.
Yeah, and
they'd
be
writing
huge.
books out of it for like 20 years.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, look at Fallujah.
Yeah.
I mean, like Fallujah, that's one battle. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of. Obviously, I'm not gonna take away from the other Fallujah.
Well, yeah,
guys,
but
like Fallujah is like
Fallujah was
fucking
a terrible fucking battle.
Yeah,
I've interviewed
exactly.
a lot of guys from
Yeah.
there. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know about war now, I'm so glad that I did not.
Yeah.
You know, get to experience what I wanted to experience. I do now out of choice.
Yeah.
But the thing about being a combat journalist is if I get scared, I can just fucking run away.
You can bug out.
I can just fucking leave. No one's gonna make me stay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's the cool part is, you know,
Yeah.
I get a little spooked out. I'm gonna wait inside, guys.
Yeah,
you know? I'm not
It's like,
fucking.
you go check it out.
Yeah, you guys go check it out. I'm gonna sit here and smoke a cigarette. I'm gonna watch the gear.
Yeah. But that's pretty wild. Let me think about with the Battle of Fallujah, but then you look at Ukraine. I mean, like Battle of Fallujah happens every month.
Yeah.
You know, or like every week. And there's something that it's like
just
the
the scale is different.
It's a different scale. Yeah.
You know, like if there were just more insurgents, there would have been
Yeah.
1,000 more Fallujahs all over Iraq.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, like I said, getting back to the Russian culture, and like you keep talking about some of the stuff in the Cold War, but like you start seeing that in Ukraine. And I think we're all seeing it's like, even like like I said, they just like they off themselves constantly. Like that's so wild to me. Like I can't imagine just being like, all right, and just eating a grenade, and they're still like can live, you know what I mean? Like, and they're like, well, this is it, you know. But there's no way out but to eat a grenade. Like to buy them, they just committing suicide, blowing their brains out, and you're just like, it's crazy too because it's just like the way they think about that is like, fucking I'm out, and it's like, especially in our military, like even maybe not in the American mindset as well, but our U.S. military is like, no, man, we're gonna fucking crawl ourselves, you know, you'd be like, I'm gonna crawl myself fucking 3 miles
Or my
out of
buddies
here.
are gonna come get me.
Exactly, you know, or something like I'll crawl halfway, they'll come get what, or I just die crawling back. Like you're gonna die trying to survive. Whereas they're just like, fuck it. They have a smoke, look at and then they drop the grenade and
I'll send this to
fucking
you
eat it,
later
you
so
know?
you can post it up. But there's like a pamphlet going around. It's like a how to kill yourself pamphlet.
No shit.
It's like how to do it with a grenade and how to do it with a rifle. It's like where you need to put the rifle, like where you need to point it and where you need to like put the grenade. It's like they recommend that you put it under your chin, stuff like that. Like I've got probably 100 videos saved on my phone of Russians just killing themselves.
Yeah.
And it's because the Kazavak's just not there. Like they know, like if they get wounded on assault, no one's gonna come fucking get them. So it's like, well, I got one option or two options.
Yeah.
It's sit here and suffer, or I can end it right now.
Yeah.
There was one I saw last week of a guy slitting his throat with barbed wire.
Jesus.
And it's like
the amount of effort. It's like you had that effort.
Yeah,
Can you
and
crawl
he's like,
away?
he's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And
like,
I'm just watching that, and I don't get like,
yeah,
because I was gonna write an article about this
Yeah.
like the desensitization of
Yeah.
like combat footage, you know, because like I'll be scrolling around like Telegram or Reddit or something,
Yeah.
and it's like I don't stop unless it's something like fucking crazy,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
to watch.
yeah,
You know, because like 5 years ago, if there was video of like someone hitting a tank with an RPG
yeah. That was
on Funker 530,
Yeah, yeah.
like
It's like, oh my god.
it's 5 billion views,
Yeah.
you know, and now
Well,
it's
the
like
Syrian civil war was that. Like you would see every once in a while you get a jihadist that hit like a Syrian tank.
yeah, and it would have like
went up.
5 million views,
Yeah,
you
like,
know.
oh my God,
And people
yeah.
like news stations would pay like thousands of dollars for this, and it's like
Yeah.
now there's so much of it, like people don't pay attention unless it's
Yeah.
the worst.
Yeah,
stuff.
you go on Telegram, you're like, just watching dudes.
It's like, you know,
Just
another
so much
drone
death.
chasing a guy through a storm drain.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
show me real violence.
Yeah, yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
I want some GoPro.
Yeah.
No, I want GoPro burning people down.
Yeah.
Like, where's that footage? You know, what is this FPV shit? You know, like, yeah, there's so much FPV stuff. But yeah, it's crazy to think that too. You're like, I'm gonna eat this grenade, or I need to off myself in this. It's just so.
And some of it is so quick.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like grenade drops next to you, blows up, 10 seconds go by, bang.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you make that decision to go from being completely okay to I need to kill myself right now?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And because like a lot of it,
Well, it's also the mentality though to be like, well, no one's like you said, it's like it's the Russian military. Like, there's no assets. Like even like they're probably thinking like, even if I did crawl back, they're probably just gonna shoot me in the head for retreating or something. You know what I mean? Like even if they
seen
made it back to their
loads of
commanders,
videos of, like-
you know what I mean? Like they'll probably beat the shit out of them for crawling back and being a coward, and then kill them anyway. Like,
well, just what's his face? It's not Kadyrov. It's like Kadyrov's like top commander of the Chechens. He put out a video not too long ago. He's like, if you surrender, like you should have killed yourself.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, we won't trade you back. Like you should find a pen and like try to kill as many of your captors as possible and then kill yourself. You know? And it's like, one, that guy's never fucking gonna do that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
The Chechen command is such fucking pussies, dude.
Yeah.
Like they're just posers. They're literally the guys who watch like some guy on YouTube, like a tutorial, and they're like, that's how it's gonna be done.
Yeah.
You know, like you could just like
Are they
some of my
still- is
favorite
it-
combat footage is the Chechens in Mariupol.
yeah, because
it's
they're
just
just like, it looks like they're doing stuff and they're not.
Yeah, there's like a video
Yeah,
where like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
shooting like a fucking stop sign.
Yeah, yeah,
One of
yeah.
my favorite videos is this guy's like ramboing an RPG out in the street, and a Ukrainian sniper shoots him in the ass.
Yeah.
And all the Chechens just stand there and they're like looking at him as he's like rolling around on the ground, and they're like, "What do we do?
What do we do now?
Like,
Yeah,
what do we
yeah,
do?
yeah.
Do we shoot him? I don't know."
Yeah. What the fuck do we do now?
Speaking about that, I interviewed someone I believed who was dead. So he was a Ukrainian soldier in Mariupol. He told me about the death of someone I had interviewed a lot, and that hit me pretty hard. That was the first time that like I interviewed someone killed in combat, like right after. And that I think about him every day. I went and visited his grave in Kyiv last time I was there. But I thought Student is his name, his call sign. I thought he was dead because like he messaged me that Anton was killed, and then nothing after that. And then 851 days later, I got a message from a new Instagram account of the same name, and he's like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I was like, "Holy shit, you're alive!" And I was like, "Where the fuck have you been?" And he's like, "I was a prisoner," you know. And I met with him on the Eastern Front my last trip, and he told me about the Chechens in Mariupol, and he's like, the first time we saw the Chechens, we were like, who the fuck are these people? he's like, they would just run down the road at us screaming words I couldn't understand.
Yeah, yeah.
And then someone was like, what do we do? And I don't know, just shoot them. It's like, they're all just in the middle of the road. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's tons of videos of them of just standing at an intersection, just ramboing AKs or
Yeah,
PKMs down a street,
Yeah.
and then one of them gets killed, and then rinse, cycle, repeat. You know, they'll just send a new guy out.
Yeah, like I think that's funny. Listen to the Viking story. He's like I am 100% sure they were just shooting out the window for their TikToks. You know, like
I love Viking. I flooded his bathroom.
I know. Yeah, he told me.
I thought that was gonna be like 10 grand. He sent me. I was doing an interview.
Yeah,
and he sent me a video on Signal, and I like checked my phone, and he's like, "You flooded the bathroom," and then like the video he sent me was from 2 floors below, and there's like water pouring out of the lights, and I was like, "Oh my god,
what happened?"
So I don't know how Ukrainian windows work.
Yeah,
you know, because you gotta like turn them and then like pull them.
Yeah,
and I don't know how Ukrainian showers work.
Yeah,
but so I'm not gonna take all the blame on this because the shower, it was clogged. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's got 3 sources of water.
Yeah.
So there's the one that comes out the top, the ones that come out the sides, and there's like a faucet head.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like a detachable one that.
Yeah.
But the shower was clogged, so I'd finished my shower, and I saw that it wasn't draining. So I was like, okay, like I'm gonna be done with my shower early, so I don't flood the bathroom.
Yeah.
I didn't see that there was the shower, the detachable head, in there. I didn't know it was there.
Yeah.
And so it was in the water, facing down,
okay.
still going. For 3 hours by the time anyone had found out. Like, I guess it was on full blast.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And then I had to pay out of pocket for it. He thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so funny.
Yeah. He was like laughing. Yeah, he was texting me. He's like, yeah, your boy fucking flooded our shit. You know, and I was like, what? You know, I was like, I have to ask Nick about it when he comes over.
He's such a good guy. I love Viking.
So you were with Viking how long? Or I mean, with did he go with you anywhere? I know you were thinking about. I know you didn't go into Kursk. You were thinking about it.
No, he
with him?
initially was gonna go, and then he signed his contract with Chosen, and then couldn't. So I was just hoofing it around by myself. I was gonna go with like an assistant cameraman, but then that journalist got killed in Kramatorsk in a hotel, and he backed out after that.
Okay.
So, but probably the right choice because I don't think. This is not to talk about like people's bravery or anything like that, but because he had like no even military experience, and I just had very limited combat experience. But like the places we went, like the things we did, I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have been able to do his job effectively as like a BCAM guy. So
and who was that? Or sorry, or you were gonna meet up with him?
Oh, he does a lot of my video editing.
On
YouTube.
Oh, that's right. Oh, he was gonna go.
Yeah, he was gonna go, and then after that journalist got killed, he said, "I'm just gonna do the remote stuff." I was like, that's totally fine, dude. Yeah, like I'm scared as fuck too. So like, don't feel bad. And this will be my 3rd trip, so don't feel bad that you're feeling scared.
Yeah, I don't expect anybody not to. You know, if you're like
it's
you're out,
scary.
you're out. Yeah.
I remember talking to you before I went to Israel about how nervous I was. Because like my first Ukraine trip was not like kinetic at all. Like you know, Chris.
Yeah, you're in like a weird spot because shit was really kinetic, but not where you guys. It was like that in between time. But you guys, I mean, shit was still going on, obviously.
Yeah, so like Bakhmut was just starting. The Kharkiv and Kherson offensives were just ending. Yeah, and so it was like, well, what do we do? And this was also like my first trip, and so like, we didn't plan anything. Yeah, you know, and that was a good learning experience of like learning to have lines in the water. Transportation squared away beforehand, stuff like that. So it was a good learning trip. Met a lot of really great people. Did some good interviews. But like as far as like, we didn't even hear artillery. Yeah, you know, it's one of those trips.
Yeah,
but, So and then Israel was just getting shot at by rockets for 2 weeks.
Yeah, which was still pretty exciting.
Which is still cool, but like I like it was other than that, it was a total burn of a trip because like the IDF didn't allow me to talk to anybody. Yeah, you know, like
because that
civilians
was like,
are like. Military, anything like that. And everyone's like, you should go to Gaza. And it's like,
you can't.
Yeah, let me just run through this Israeli block post.
Yeah. Because I remember you were talking to me like, let's go. And I was like, I would love to go. But I was like, we can't do anything. Like, I knew it right away. I was like, the Jews. I was like, the Jews aren't going to, they're like, I was like, the Israelis aren't going to let anybody. Like, I was like, because it goes from like Ukraine. And I was like, this is Israel. Like, they are going to lock this motherfucker down. Like, I know no one's going to get it out. And you were like, I'm going. It would have been cool to go, though. It would have been cool.
I got as close as I possibly could.
It would have been cool. It's just that you couldn't get anything. You know what I mean? Like, for me, and then on top of it, like, you know, obviously financially, I was like, I can't go for like 2 weeks and not make anything. You know, it would have been really cool to go, though. It really, obviously, would have been.
Yeah, we saw a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. The most intense bombardment I've ever heard personally, like Ukraine and Israel combined, like that bombardment of Gaza was by far.
You just hearing that.
It was constant, dude.
Yeah.
There was like a Friday night that I was sure they were gonna go in. They were gonna, like the ground invasion.
Yes, right. I forget. You were there right before the ground invasion, right?
Well, I left.
Yeah.
The day before it happened. Because I was like,
yeah.
okay, if it doesn't happen by this day, I gotta take off. Because you know, like I work with kids. It's my day job.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I can only take off so much time because I'm not being paid to be here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, okay.
To not have kids again, I love my children so much, but to like have the experience I have now with like the camera, you know what I mean? Just like if it was just my wife, she would hate it, but she'd be like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like to like open up this stuff, and I guess we can kind of jump into it a little bit with like the combat journalist, because not only are you archiving now, like I said, Ukraine. I guess we can kind of backtrack a little bit. I mean, Ukraine really blew the doors open.
Yeah.
For Battles and Beers, essentially. I mean, to be completely
100%.
honest, like we had met through that. I think you had done a little bit of the Afghan evac, or you were doing, or did you cover some of that? Or I remember you saying that was kind of a catalyst.
Doing a lot of interviews at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Of the guys who were there, even the Taliban.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So did you get guys that were like at Abbey Gate, or was it more just like
everyone,
everybody?
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah.
Especially like now, like I've talked to like anyone you can picture, like of any job that's there. I'm planning like a big like YouTube doc this coming August.
Really?
Yeah, it'll be nice because I've got like audio. I've got like the brief of them like going in, you know, like what's gonna happen and stuff like that. Like the Marine recorded it in his pocket.
Oh,
it's
no
like
shit.
motivational as fuck, dude.
Yeah.
I can't wait to share it.
Okay,
It's
all right.
fucking really cool.
Let me know how you do that, because I think that'd be a good.
We could do some collaborating on that.
Yeah. Well,
So I've got
let me talk to John about that, because I think that would be it's a tough one for me. I think it's a tough one for all that GWAT vets. Like it's a hard one to watch, because there's a doc that came out like on like Netflix or HBO like within a year, and you're just like, I can't watch it. You know, it's like
time's got to pass.
it's a time. Okay, yeah. But even if it's like. It's wild. It's the whole thing. I mean, what would be really cool though is I think there's a way that could tell the story that would be less chaotic, and I can talk to you afterwards about that. I think because you probably have the most knowledge, and obviously I can't remember his name. The kid that he's been on like Sean Ryan's, and he testified in Congress. The scout sniper that got blown up.
Tyler.
Did you talk to him? I imagine you talked, or he's the one that you haven't talked to.
I had like scheduled like a call with his like manager, and they never got back to me.
Oh, okay.
But I've got enough testimony for other people who were at Abbey Gate.
Yeah.
Even the Taliban, you know, like I'm probably the only person to ever get an apology from the Taliban. So this is a funny story and like
Really?
my little claim to fame. But I had interviewed a member anonymously, of course. And I uploaded it on Facebook, and like so many like people who like refused like to even read that perspective, like just chewed me out for like giving them a platform. And I'm like, I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, man.
Yeah.
Like you got to meet me in the middle. Like
Yeah.
you can't just get your side and stuff you like, you know, it's like, what are you, a snowflake?
Yeah.
Like you gotta be able to at least ingest media that you don't like from time to time. But anyway, they like reported it. They got like the page on Facebook deleted and stuff like that for like promoting like extremism. I don't know, something. It was like 3 years ago. But the guy messaged me afterwards, and he's like, I'm sorry that this happened and that you got in trouble.
The Taliban's like, I'm really sorry.
This guy is like, I'm sorry this happened to you.
What was his perspective, or what was his story?
So his story was actually, so he was not in the airport. His story was from Marja.
Oh,
And it was
got it. Okay.
It was talking about how like an American helicopter had like strafed them on like their motorcycles, and that he laid in a ditch and pretended to be dead for like 3 hours, and then once he was sure everyone was gone, he like rolled into
the canal.
a canal and like low crawled away until his like cousin came and picked him up.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. You know, so it's like
It's a crazy story.
it's
Like,
a crazy fucking story.
Yeah. No, like I said, I think the Afghan evac blew the doors open for everything. Everyone started getting together on that. And then Ukraine is what really was the catalyst for all. I mean, even myself getting back involved with war, I guess you would say, and war docs and filmmaking.
Because it happened right away. because I remember like December of that year, I was pretty sure the invasion was going to happen. And so I started finding like Russians online and Ukrainians online and like interviewing them. And I ended up doing like a weird dialogue between a Russian soldier talking to me, but the message is meant for this Ukrainian soldier who was also talking to me. And so like I was the middleman. They were like kind of like shit talking each other like 2 weeks before the invasion started. And
the Russian know they were going to invade because apparently no one in Russia knew they were going to invade. Yeah.
And that was another big story that like really broke the floodgates for me. So I used to be in contact with this guy who was a Russian VDV soldier who ended up coming to the United States, and he's in the U.S. Army now.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I met him through Tales.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
From the Grid Square.
Oh, yeah. I think we probably know his story. I know I don't know which one specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Of that.
But he hooked me up with some of his VDV friends, and they hooked me up with some of their like mobilized friends, and one of the guys had no idea they didn't even know they were in Ukraine until they started getting shot at.
Yeah.
You know, and that was like one of the big things that like catapulted me into the public eye.
Yeah.
Because that got shared like 500,000 times.
Yeah. I probably saw that. I'm sure I was one of the ones that was like, oh my God, because that was the open source intelligence was nuts. I remember hopping on, it was Instagram, but also on Twitter before it was X, or maybe it was X, but no, it wasn't.
It was
X
Twitter.
Yet. Was it still? Yeah, it was still Twitter at the time.
Still Twitter.
But they were posting how to make Molotov cocktails, which was dope as fuck. Like they were like putting online in Ukrainian and in English, but it was like just on it was the Ukrainian.
They were on
like,
billboards too.
Yeah. It was just like, and also like here's the tank and here's the weak spots. It was like within the 2 days after, so you could check social media, like the Ministry of like Defense or like the Ukrainian like Twitter account, and it just shows you how to make bombs, Molotov cocktails, like exactly. And then like, this is where you hit Russian tanks, BMPs. This is the intake. I was like, dude, this is fucking wild. But then you're seeing, helicopters getting shot out of the sky.
Yeah. It was fucking crazy, dude.
It was fucking nuts.
I remember thinking this is going to be over in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Same.
And now, 100%. Now here we are, almost 3 years later.
Yeah. Well, I think, like I said, everything's been underestimated. I mean, Russia underestimated what Ukraine would do. Ukraine really hit back. Clearly, I mean, they were running out of fuel. Like the Russians were running out of fuel. Guys didn't even know they were there. Like you could tell it was a half-assed plan that they thought they were just going to roll into Ukraine and take it. And obviously that didn't happen at all. And
it's the Russians being misinformed by their own command too. Like I talked to Pavel Filatyev. So he was like a famous Russian VDV deserter. He wrote the book Zov. I remember before he published Zov, he spoke to us at B&B. And when he was in Mykolaiv getting shelled, they were told like the war was already won. They were just mopping up and that there was like parades going on in Kyiv.
No shit.
Yeah. And then he went to the hospital because he got like shrapnel in his eye, and he went to the hospital, and then there they were told that the Moscow, the ship that was sunk, wasn't actually sunk, but there were sailors in the hospital with him who were like,
it's fucking
pointing
gone.
at the TV. They're like, it's fucking at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
And that was one of the catalysts for him to just desert the army and then write the book.
Yeah. Is he in Ukraine then, or was he, or what's his? Because
he's not in.
Oh, he's just like okay.
He's somewhere else. Right?
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. I would imagine
they're after him.
Yeah. I don't think doesn't have friends anywhere.
Yeah, they didn't give them like any supplies or anything like that. Like we saw all those videos of like Russians looting convenience stores and stuff like that. It's because they had no food.
They have no food. Yeah.
They went in there with like parade uniforms in their backpack. They had fucking nothing. So like, of course, he described it like the sack of Rome. Yeah. They went to like a grocery store and there were soldiers sleeping on like like the conveyor belts at the checkout station. They were like sleeping on those. Yeah. So they'd been awake for days. They didn't have any food. Yeah. Like cigarettes were worth their weight in gold. Yeah. Type of thing. It was just a shit show for them at the beginning of the war.
Mykolaiv, so we were trying to get kids out of there. I remember that.
Yeah, I was there for 2 days on my way down to Kherson. I was waiting for my guy to come pick me up so he could get me through the checkpoint, because no Westerners are allowed in Kherson. It's a closed city. Yeah. So like if you want to get in there, you got to get in there with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that's wild. It was a crazy. I mean, this whole like last 2 years, it's been. Obviously, it's on everyone's minds, even in the U.S. Like everyone talks about it. Like it's.
Yeah, I did a poll on Instagram like yesterday about what are you most interested in, you know, and it was like 70% of people were like the Russo-Ukrainian war.
Yeah.
Like by far.
Well, I think Syria
Syria
everybody.
or Gaza, anything. That was like
Yeah, but
5% of the vote.
Middle East gets so weird because it's like because we were at war with the GWAT and it doesn't affect anybody.
And people can't identify with it.
No, I can't. Well, it's like, also like the Arab wars. It's I don't want to say the Arab wars, but it's like these are Muslim wars that it's always a fight over tribal land. It's always something weird. You can't really relate to it. And also too is does it affect us? Yes, but no.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, be like the Syrian conflict's been going on for the Civil War's been 11 years, and they just took. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, as we're talking, you know, it's like they took like last week they took Aleppo, you know, or like they went through and.
That's
now
how you do a 3-day military operation.
Exactly. Yeah, it was pretty funny. That was like the meme where he's like smacking them.
That's how you do a special military operation.
It was funny too because now people were like, apparently, I think the Ukrainians gave money to the Syrian or the Al Qaeda.
Yeah, I think they taught them how to. They sent
some,
like operators down there to like teach them how to fly drones.
Yeah, so some people were like, "What, Ukraine?" I'm like, "Yeah, man. Did you not know about the Mali operation? They basically sided with these terrorist insurgents to kill the Russians
they have
in Mali."
PVC patches.
Yeah.
For sale that are Mali patches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're like a big thing in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't matter.
Kursk patches, Mariupol, Bakhmut, Avdiivka.
You have
Mali.
Exactly. You have no idea. Like they're like, I get it too. I was like, that's a terrorist group. Like, cool. Go kill them and we'll pay you. And like, we don't like you either, but we'll pay. Just go kill them. Like, cool.
Enemy's my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I like I said, I think it's. Well, and also it's a bigger conventional war. Typically, the you know when you go to Syria or you go into Yemen or these are counterinsurgency wars. They barely move the ball. They barely move the line. It's always about tribals, and it's like people get paid off, and the lines are always moving, and there's no massive like Poland doesn't need to worry about you know the Kurds in Syria. I mean, it would be cool. Like the Kurds, you know, maybe some of those areas, but it's more geopolitical than it is like consequential on like with shitloads of people. Like
100%.
A massive war breaking out. Yeah, a massive war breaking out between the tribes. Like, okay, whatever. It's like a fucking Tuesday.
But Ukraine gets conquered.
Yeah,
like that could be
like Poland. Like when you go to that region, I think that's when people start talking about. It's a little. I shouldn't say frustrating about this war, but like the Americans that talk about it, they're like, well, I don't know. Like it's like you haven't even been over. You know what I mean? Like guys like us, we've been over. We understand how people feel. Like even my wife, you know, she obviously is not a fan of it, but she's like, how people feel is like, it's nuts. Like Poland is like this is on the fucking line. Like they are, you know, because sometimes they'll bring up like, well, Poland got mad at Ukraine. I was like, yeah, it's like fucking everyone's getting mad at Ukraine, but it doesn't matter. They are helping Ukraine as much as they can, but they're NATO, so it's this weird thing. But it's like, look, man, they take. I mean, what the only thing stopping Russia from going into Estonia. Which, by the way, like Minnesota is a sister, like our National Guard is a sister company to them, is because they're NATO. I mean,
that's the sole reason.
There's sole reason, and on top of that, they would take Estonia in a fucking day. Like that would, with the incompetence of the Russian military, they would take it because there's nothing there.
Same with Georgia.
Yeah,
Georgia's got a population of like less than 4 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they just roll right through. Yeah. And now they've got more.
And I think when people talk about Ukraine, it's like that can suck us into a giant. Like you can. Look, Russia will chew up they don't care about their soldiers. And I think people don't understand
that. That was what was so surprising to me.
Yeah.
Was I thought Russia had evolved to a point as a society where they would not accept these levels of casualties. Like I thought they were beyond the World War II, like the Soviet Afghan war mindset of like as many men as it takes.
Yeah.
You know, and I
has not changed.
Never been proved more wrong.
Yep.
Because like the average Russian opinion is they either have no opinion or they have the opinion of the state.
Yeah.
You know, because that's all the information they're given.
Yeah.
Like I interviewed, because like the state propaganda is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Like even I initially was pro-Russian.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Like when the war started in 2014, I was pro-Russian initially because the Russian propaganda got to me first.
Yeah.
You know, because people tend to latch on to the first piece of information they're given, and that becomes the truth. Mm-hmm. And then any information contrary to that, I'm guilty of this too, is an attack on your intelligence and your ego. Mm-hmm. That's why people in the United States, even their political opinions, they just dig deeper. Mm-hmm. You know, it's so hard to talk to people about politics because anything contrary to what you believe is just an attack on you.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what was what's so difficult about Russian propaganda is that it's really good. You know, because they just blanket it. It's everything that you could possibly hate. They'll throw it out there.
Yeah.
They're the gays. Oh, they're the Nazis.
Yeah.
It's the Western imperialists. It's NATO.
Yeah.
You know, they just blanket it out there so they get enough. They get as many people from enough groups as possible.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you'll know one talking point is bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
But you agree with another talking point. So like that's they're the right guys.
And
you know?
it's crazy seeing that in real time because I've seen that argument like on the popular podcasts or when people are like, well, you know, NATO was encroaching. You know, even I've heard friends say that. It's like, well,
no
NATO,
one is forcing these countries to join NATO.
Yeah.
And maybe stop invading your neighbors and people. Like, they're joining NATO for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And it was funny. They're like, well, NATO's encroaching with Ukraine. I was like, NATO's on the border with fucking Russia already with like 3 different countries. It's not about NATO. And then they're like, well, you know.
And that's become a talking point.
Yeah,
as the war moves on,
Yeah.
the goalpost of victory
just shifts.
moves.
Yeah.
Initially, it was taking over the whole country.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Kyiv was never the objective. That was a feint. We just want to denazify the country.
Yeah.
And once they couldn't find any Nazis, it was the biolabs.
Yeah.
And then once these pictures of these biolabs in the Donbass that they apparently had never came to the surface. Like, I haven't heard a biolab talking point in forever.
I remember hearing about
but now
that at the beginning.
Zelensky's like a gay Jewish Nazi.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is you're like, it's like, you know, they're like, well, is it really our war? Do we need, you know, oh, they're corrupt. No, there's corrupt. I was like, every fucking country. I was like, we're corrupt.
Look at our government,
Yeah, look
bro.
at our
Like-
government. Like, you're bitching about Nancy Pelosi every day. Like, well, the Russians are going to, they're Eastern Bloc too. Like, what the fuck do you think's happening?
At the very least, right, you should at least oppose a government where their state TV argues at least like once every other week that the United States should be nuked.
Yeah.
They're talking about you, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they want to nuke you.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's why the Russian propaganda is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, also, like, we talked about this before. It also, I think, it doesn't matter what political party was. It's always the opposite. So that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, like, right now, Republicans, 95% of Republicans, like, agree with the war. The 5% that are vocal is just because Biden's was in power when they invaded. Now, are there bullet points for them? Yes, 100%. If the Afghan pullout never happened, Russia would have never invaded Ukraine. They knew that Biden wasn't going to make a move. It's just plain and simple. I mean, that's just how it was. I mean, you see a world power leaving its own people behind. They're not going to step in on a giant war. You escalate to war right away. I mean, even Obama did that with the red line in Syria. He's like, the red line's chemical weapons. Both sides use chemical weapons. Nothing fucking happened. They handed it over to the Russians. So they called their bluff. Afghan didn't even have to call bluff. They're like, the U.S. isn't going to do shit. And then guess what happened? The U.S. didn't do shit, and they invaded. So, but you could just tell, though, right away, though, it was like the support of Ukraine. In the beginning, people were like, within the first few weeks, like, yeah, we got to support them. And then after that, it became political. It's like,
my tax dollars.
That's
the big talking point now.
Well, the other thing, too, is like they did that shit with the Afghan war. It's like, oh, cool. Well, you plunged this country into darkness. Did you finally get your free healthcare? Did you finally get your free college? No, it didn't fucking matter. And that was a Democrat socialist talking point about the Afghan war. And now the Republicans are saying that shit with Ukraine. I was like, it doesn't matter. That money goes away. You're not getting, you know, whatever funding or just whatever you think. Like, you're not getting money back on your taxes because we cut Ukraine funding.
And war is expensive.
Yeah,
dude. Like, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like we spend an average of $300 million a day in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's what they said.
And it's like people are like upset when like Ukraine gets like a $75 million like aid package, and it's like that's realistically like 15 tanks and like 3 shipping containers of javelins.
Yeah, it's not much.
They don't have like people don't read what's in the aid packages, and they don't read what we're getting out of it either.
Yeah,
like this.
Well, the other thing too is I think what's frustrating is and I think it's our frustration as well is the guys on the ground still aren't getting what they needed. You know, and like say you do these big aid packages.
That's my big frustration.
Yeah. And
too.
people and civilians don't know that. They're like, well, we're sending $100 billion, and these guys are still. It's like, I agree with you. There is nuances to that bill, but there hasn't been like an aid package that really is like, here's fucking 10,000 or here's 20,000 night vision goggles with 10,000. You know what I mean? Like, no one's brought out that, like, here's the body armor bill. This is $20 million, and it's body armor to literally outfit because they don't fucking have it. Here's our comms bill. If you would like show that, then they'd be like, oh shit, like, but it's not getting to them.
No.
I mean, especially in the beginning of the war, all they wanted was DJI drones. I was like, and they're trying to raise money for it. And I was talking to a sergeant major of like one of the units back in like 2023 or 2022 or whatever it was. And it was just like, he's like, we just need drones. We just need drones. It was a more dropper before the FPVs really kind of came into play.
FPVs became like big in like March of 23.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this was, I think, like fall of 22 or something like that. It was like, yeah. And because we were here, I remember talking with him and, you know, just trying to figure it out. Like, hey, you know, and I was like, I'll try, you know, but I was like, but then it was like everyone's throwing all this money around. I was like, well, I'm not paying for this shit out of pocket. And by that point in the war, like the fundraising aspect was like not over, but like even when I talked to Tyler,
There's a lot of donor fatigue.
Yeah, donor fatigue. Well, yeah, 100%. And then the evacuations, like when we were there, like the evacuations were real until about June. That's like June, July is when basically everything was done. Like, and you know, all the emergency shit was kind of over. Now it turned into supply runs. You know, you're doing medevacs for like
the logistics part.
Yeah,
of
if you need
of
to
an
be
attritional
evac, you
war.
were already evac. And if you decide to stay in your town, then that's on you. Like that's no longer the Western nonprofits trying to, you know, rescue people from areas because they don't know what's going to happen. It's like, you guys you're on your own now. Like you can get out, or you know what I mean, or it's within that. You know, this is kind of, we're not doing this anymore because that emergency.
Some of that's
response
still
is coming
around
down.
as the Russians have progressed forward. You know, like people who were safe before are not safe now.
Yeah, but they can leave though. At least I mean, it's not
there's a
not
lot of
shock
people
and awe
who
campaign.
wait till the last minute
Yeah,
to
yeah.
leave. Then they're the ones that you see in the Instagram videos of like, we evacuated 6 people today.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And it's like there's incredibly brave people going to get them. But like these people also had an opportunity to leave,
take off,
for
yeah.
2.5 years prior to this.
Yeah. No, I get that, and that's what I'm saying is I think those first few months, and then that's when, like I said, people are trying to figure out how did they move forward with this, and again, I hope, you know, the SecDef coming in, or if he does get nominated, or he is nominated, but if he gets in, I hope he does. I really do. I mean, that's like me and you talking. Like that's the guy that's going up. It's like you need to get the supply to these motherfuckers. So if that's just the bill is just supply weapons and body armor to
And
the
we can
soldiers.
afford it.
Oh, dude, it's only a
That's the
few.
thing. Like,
it's not
the
a
thing
much.
that like one of the big takeaways from this war is like Russia really is a paper tiger.
Yeah.
Like you and I were talking about this beforehand.
Yeah.
Just look at the Marine Corps, right? And look at your average Russian soldier, your average infantryman in the Marine Corps, and then your average like Russian infantryman. In the Marine Corps, they all have the same kit. They've got the same exact uniform. They've got a rifle. Now they've got suppressors, and every single person has a pair of MVGs. In
Dual
Russia,
tubes too, by the way. Yeah.
In Russia, most units are lucky if a platoon has one NVG,
Yeah.
and everyone in the Marine Corps has that.
It's like infantry school.
Yeah.
You do patrols. Like there's one guy in the squad that has
Yeah,
like this.
it's like they're
the
like,
night vision
welcome to
goggles.
ITB.
Yeah,
Your first
exactly.
lesson.
Yeah.
Real life trench attack.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yep. It is pretty wild to think that. I wouldn't even say the average infantryman, obviously when you compare it to that, but I mean like their VDV, like our infantry.
The quality's gone down.
Yeah.
There are men who are very experienced.
Yeah.
There are units in the Russian army that are very fucking good.
Yeah.
And there are even units in the Chechen forces who are very good.
But even pound for pound, though, you stick that against a boot Marine regiment or boot Marine company.
You know, and that's what
they're gonna
that's
give you
my
a fight
point
for your life.
You know, like
yeah,
just the training that the United States has, the equipment
mentality.
that they have,
Yeah.
and there's like the simple fact. Like I might be biased because I'm a Marine, but like just the fact that like you are a Marine.
Yeah.
That's like a whole nother level of like being a Marine is
Yeah.
still the most proud thing.
Yeah.
About my life. And it's,
Yeah.
you know, like I've experienced like way more as a combat journalist, but I'm still more proud to be a Marine. Just simply to be part of that brotherhood, and I can't let them down. Like that's part of like what gives me the courage to like do these things is like, okay, like I am a Marine. I can't bitch out now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like that would be the same mentality that translates to like US versus Russia.
Yeah.
You know, you could fight VD, like there's a case of that, like where a bunch of like former Marines like fought a bunch of Spetsnaz and they fucking killed all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying is like when you not only the mentality of it, but the Western fighters that are over there are guys in the GWAT, and now their commander. You know, like you even talk about Ryan. Ryan was Army National Guard. Now 34 ID was much better equipped. Like I was Minnesota Red Bulls, he was Iowa Red Bull, or however that worked out. But like he's like we were better supplied. But even then though, like national I mean National Guard, it's about the Western training mentality, like the aggressive violence of action on an objective. That's just how we're trained. Like the Soviet mindset, even like Ukrainians have to be kind of trained into that. He's like, that's the issues they have, is just they're just not that well trained. And then obviously Russia's not either, but like the Ukrainians are having issues with that, and they're trying to train them, be like, look, you don't look to your officer, you were in your squad, and so when you don't stop in the trench line, but just keep going. You have to keep going, because they'll just stop and they'll be outside the trench waiting for an hour.
The difficulty now is everyone on both sides who has enlisted for the purpose to fight and like defend their country has already done that.
Yeah.
So now they're drawing from people who don't want to be there, and now both sides are expecting people who don't want to be there, who are there, like the Russian side. Most of them are there for the money.
The Russian side, yeah, because they're better if they're dead. Their family gets the money.
Well, they're being offered like life-changing amounts of money.
Yeah.
So like there's a video I shared the other day where it was like a bunch of illegal immigrants in Russia who are being offered like 210,000 rubles a month or something like that, and it equals like $2,000. Mm-hmm. But when the average income in Russia is like 15 grand a year, $2,000 a month is a life-changing amount of money. So that's why you've got like a ton of guys who are like 35 to like 60 years old who are enlisting into the Russian army for the money.
Yeah.
And then you've got guys who are being like forcibly mobilized in the Ukrainian army. Mm-hmm. Neither one of them wants to be there, and now you have to teach these guys that you've got to be aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's like the difficulty that they're running into now, is just training these guys to be. But
what's up with the Ukrainian military, like on that aspect? Because I've heard a little bit about that. Like,
the Ukrainians do, I think, a better job of training.
Yeah.
There are a lot of documented cases of Russians in like signing their papers, and then they're dead in Ukraine 3 weeks later.
Yeah. But I'm saying is like, but even with like the mentality of like, we got to keep fighting this war. Like I was talking with, what's his name? I can't believe I forgot his name. He was Alex. And I know there's a kind of a cultural rift with like people in Kyiv aren't feeling the war like they used to. I mean, there still is. I mean, the rockets still hit, but it's a different mentality, you know, and then you go all the way out and then the war is being fought. Mm-hmm. Also, too, I think that's just a thing of like, and I understand why the Ukrainians are doing it, which is like the older people go fight first. And I'm like, honestly, makes sense for them because they need the younger generation to
You need to make babies when the war's over.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas like you know, it totally makes it sucks for older guys that, you know, they fought or did whatever, but you're like, all right, well, that's what you got to do, and that's how the nation survives. Like I get
the older guys can fight.
Yeah.
There is I think it was the 54th Brigade, K2 Battalion, that 1 versus 7 video. Mm-hmm. The guy in like combat pants, a t-shirt with an AK with like pockets full of mags, fights off like 7 Russians.
Yeah.
He was like in his 50s.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, and I interviewed, because he died from a drone
or
or mortar afterwards. But his just violence of action, like either killed or scared off all the Russians who had assaulted their position.
Yeah.
Because like the Russians, they woke up to the Russians already in their trenches.
Yeah.
Because the drones missed them. And so he just grabbed his AK, ran out there, and started spraying.
Yeah.
Right? And he was like, hey, I got to make him feel like there's like a whole platoon of Ukrainians on the other side of this trench. And he just, you can see the video. He's just like
full
Haji firing, but like accurately,
Yeah.
right into this trench. And the Russians, they're all backing up and like scared of this one guy. And he fought off 7 dudes.
Yeah.
And saved the lives of everyone else who was sleeping in the dugouts.
Yeah.
You know, I've got the testimony of one of the guys who witnessed the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. I'm trying to get him nominated to be awarded Hero of Ukraine.
That's pretty dope.
Like, that's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah,
Like, he literally sacrificed his life to save all his friends.
Yeah.
And he was like in his 50s.
No shit.
He sent me pictures of him like fishing, you know, like at the front line. He's just a normal dad.
Yeah.
You know, and just forced into this position where he's got to excel to save his friends. Is insane.
Well, I think this thing too is if Ukraine makes a move to take back, like then that's when I think they swoop everybody up and they're like, this is the push.
So that's the other thing.
I think like after this
the morale is, I wouldn't say low. It's just kind of stagnant because they don't want to keep dying for nothing.
Yeah.
You know, like,
you don't want to, like, if they called a peace deal and it's like, well, why do we keep dying for this?
The
just
Western countries are like drip feeding
Yeah.
enough to keep them alive, but not enough to give them something to like really punch back.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the mentality now is like, we're tired, we're exhausted, but we're not, I want to quit tired. It's just, it's almost 3 years of conventional war. And most of the guys in uniform have been in uniform since the beginning.
Yeah. So and they're probably just getting exhausted.
They're just exhausted, man.
Yeah.
Like, picture how tired you were after like a 9-10 month deployment.
Yeah.
And then multiply that by like 4.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I imagine. And then there's no end in sight.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is there's no like
you're relying on the biggest country in the planet to be like, well, we like you, maybe we don't. You know what I mean? Like,
because the enemy's not going to run out of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they will eventually, but you're going to run out before they do. So it's a lot going against you, and it's hard to maintain morale. So I understand why some of the guys are discouraged.
Yeah. Well, it's tough though. Like I said, you're relying on another country's election to be like, what's the fate of our country? That'd be so wild to us to be like, man, we really got to wait for Mexico's president because we don't know what we're gonna do.
Again, like American privilege. Like, we are so fortunate to be so spoiled that we don't know what war is.
Yeah.
I tried explaining this to my fiance the other day because she was asking me what Ukraine is like. And I was
amazing.
Like, it could happen here.
Yeah.
Like, we were at a restaurant, we were at a coffee shop. And it's like, this could be a casualty collection point.
Yeah.
Where we're at right now. Like, there could be wounded men lying on the tables. There could be dead guys behind the counter where they're collecting all the corpses. I was like, that's what war in our country could look like.
Yeah. So it's funny we talk about the. Did you watch Civil War, the film? Yeah.
That's what she thought I was doing.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not the second man in the stack with a camera. Like, that's not me.
No, yeah. And they could have done a better job. It was funny because even like Alex Garland, he was like, yeah, I have family members that are war photographers. I was like, well, did they not tell you the truth? Because your perception of war photographers is like terrible in this movie.
There's one scene in that I found that was really accurate from my perspective. And that was the scene when they're at that like train or bus station. And there's all those like tracers going off in the night in the distance.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like, we're going over there tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then the girl, she did a really great job of acting in this scene because that's exactly how I felt before going to the trenches in Kherson, where it's like the night before and you've got like that like pit in your stomach and like people are like talking to you, but you're like only half hearing them, because you're like so in your head about what could happen, you're so worried about tomorrow, and then like you're forcing like laughter, like someone tells a joke and you're like,
yeah.
Like just forcing some kind of emotion to kind of like pull you out of that. And that was a really accurate scene in the movie that I thought was like the anxiety that you feel beforehand as someone who's new to this, and then also the more experienced people. There's that guy who is just like in his sleeping bag, like drinking a bottle of whiskey. That was the soldiers I was with. Because the night before, we were drinking in an apartment, like 700 meters from the Russians. And so we're just sitting in there getting drunk, and I think it was just like a test to see how I would do. Before they would take me out there, and they're just chill guys, tired. They're still in their kit. There's like one of them pulled out a live grenade when we were all really drunk. He's like, check this out.
Yeah, like shenanigans of like drinking with Ukrainians.
Okay, we'll keep this in here. Singing songs together. That cooled me down a lot when we went out there. There's like this. So it was on the island of like Ostrov, and there's still people living there. And there's like this little coffee shop on like the northern side of the buildings. And we were standing there with a bunch of the soldiers just waiting to get on this van to go to the trenches. And I was so in my like head about what could be happening to me in like 5 minutes, because we're well within artillery range. We're well within grad, anything like that. FPV drones too. Well within that. And so I've seen the videos online of what happens to vans full of people all the time, and that was my thought. So I got this coffee. I'm like standing there, like smoking a cigarette, like, like I couldn't even tell you what kind of coffee I got, what it tasted like, any of the things around me. I couldn't tell you anything because I was so in my head. And then this van pulls up. It's not camouflage at all. It's just like this fucking red van that they bought the day before. No EW on it. And it's like an 8-pack van. There's like 10 of us, 11 including the driver. So I get in the back of the van, And I'm like visibly like, because this is my first like real trip to like the zero line. You know, like I gotten like incoming our rockets and like mortars and ATGMs and stuff in Israel. But it's nothing like a drone, you know, or like having the enemy just at that point 400 meters from you. So I'm like in this van and I'm like shaking, right? And I vividly remembered like the thoughts that were going through my head. I was so fucking scared, dude. And then the guy behind me noticed like how fucking nervous I was, because I was just thinking like, because there's potholes everywhere there from artillery. So like this road gets hit all the time, and there's drones everywhere. Like if you know, like anyone who knows anything about Kherson, it's the drone density that's there. And so I'm just freaking out. I'm like, okay, there's no EW on this van. It's like brand new. It's like not painted. Like it's so new to like the brigade that they haven't had time to paint it yet. And so they're using it to like drop off guys and pick guys up and take them to go rest. And so I'm sitting in the van and I'm like, okay, there's no EW. We're well within FPV range. I'm just hoping if an FPV hits us that the meat of everyone else in there shields me. you know? One of those thoughts. I'm like that level of morbid in my head. And the guy behind me notices how nervous I am. And he pulls out his phone and he goes on YouTube, and I hear from behind me, "Ride on the Magic School Bus." He starts playing the Magic School Bus song. I don't know what it was about it, but it like knife through butter just cut all the tension out of me. It was like, that was like the moment that I like cut the threshold of like the fear of what could happen. I just like accepted like, okay, this could be my last 5 minutes on Earth. I could be really fucking afraid about what's going to happen, or I could enjoy this funny song with this guy who's trying to make me feel better. And so I just fucking laughed my way all the way up to the trenches. And then like 5 minutes after that, I had my first drone experience.
No shit. What was your first drone experience then?
Going to the trenches. So we went into this building, and then within 15 meters of the building is the entrance to the trenches. And so I ran from the building to the entrance, and then right away the lead guy is like, down, drone. And I was like, fucking Christ. Like, already? But the one thing I remember about that was that I wasn't as afraid as I thought I was going to be. Because I was more focused on running the camera. I was like, I didn't come this far just to fuck it up by like just recording my feet. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I know what I'm doing with this camera.
So we just kept running, because the trenches there are really well constructed. Because like they don't have anything to do other than build really good defenses. Because the Russians are across the river, and they're not going to like fill up 50,000 landing craft and do a D-Day landing on the beaches of Kherson, right? So some guys will come over, you know. I didn't witness this, but while I was there, the Russians sent 3 jet skis over, with 2 guys on each, and a Ukrainian FPV like strafed them, and one of the guys on the back fell off and drowned immediately.
Jesus,
because he must have had steel plates, and he just fell off and fucking drowned. So that's like about as much like incursions that happens there, unless it's like a proper raiding party where it's like, okay, we're gonna go establish a beachhead on the islands there. But yeah, the drone appeared, ran right into the trenches, and it's like chain link on the sides and on the top, and they've got like plywood above you, and it's like covered in cami netting. So like the FPV, the drones, they aren't just gonna waste an FPV like trying to guess where guys are in the trenches.
So like I said, they're pretty well built trenches, not like the eastern side where it's like everything's open and they're doing drone droppers, or like they're hunting dudes down around. It's like a very
so like realistically, if you're in the trenches there, you're safer than out in the east. It's more dangerous to like be a civilian in Kherson, because they're just hunting people there. When I was there was like a drone drop on a bunch of old ladies at a bus station.
No shit.
You know, they'll hit fucking anybody. Like if you're out in the open, like you're considered fair game in that city. But yeah, then I went through the trenches, came up on a guy who was like, "Who the fuck are you?" Because no one told him I was coming out there. Got to film like the Russian positions through like the machine gun ports and some of the bunkers and stuff like that. It was cool. Did a little interview out there. It was interesting. And then the Orlan drone came overhead, and then I was told like, get the fuck out of the trenches, because Orlan's bad news.
What's that? Or
it's like a big Russian drone. I'm not sure what like munitions they've got on them, stuff like that. But I was just told like they're dangerous. You gotta leave.
Yeah.
And so I went out and we went back to the building and I swallowed my dip pouch. I've got it all on camera too. I'm like running and I swallow it and I get into the room and my medic's like, "Are you good?" I'm like, throwing up this dip pouch and I got it all on camera. It's really fucking funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was when we were supposed to go out to the artillery positions. And we were supposed, I can't remember which ones we were going to film, but that morning we were like, "Hey, are we going out? What's going on?" They're like, "Yeah, the Russian counter battery, it's too heavy." I was like, they're like, "We were about to go out to send you guys," and then they got hit. So like with the Russian counter battery. So we're going to send you to a different unit or to a different artillery unit to film because that's way too fucking dangerous. And even Azov, I think it was Azov, or maybe it was something else. There's a unit, but when we got into country about a few days before, we're like, Chris had made a lot of contacts, and one of the commanders like, "Hey, we want you to come whenever you come back, we'll go." And when we were heading out there, like, it's way too heavy. The fighting is so heavy, we can't have you guys out here anywhere.
Yeah,
Like,
they don't want dead journalists on their hands
anywhere.
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, we don't want, it's just too risky. It's too risky. Yeah,
I
so we
went
had to
out
like
with,
pivot and go with third assault.
I went out with an artillery battery, Azov, near Pokrovsk, and fucking cool guys, man.
Yeah,
Artillerymen don't give a fuck.
yeah,
Like their like little artillery like counter battery bunker was like 50 meters away from the gun in a underground. Just cooking food down there and have some tea. They went and did like a little fire mission on a Russian mortar team that had been set up, and they hit that guy. Those guys. We went back and had some tea. Did an interview with the gunners. Just cool guys.
Yeah.
It was like all pitch black too.
Yeah.
Like we did because I got out there because we were supposed to be out with an ambulance that day, and they had 2 casualties, but because of the drone density, they couldn't go pick them up. And so like you're sitting on listening to the radio. I couldn't understand any of it. My translator was talking, but there's like guys like asking to get evacuated and stuff like that. But the ambulance can't go pick them up because if the ambulance gets hit, everyone after that is fucked.
Yeah.
Like anyone who gets wounded after that, like
you're done. Yeah.
you're done. Like it's going to be days before they can get you out. And that was the case for a lot of people. Because the day before that, I was at a Azov stabilization point, and we were there like 4 hours, and they brought in like 19 casualties, and most of them were concussions.
Yeah.
Because that's like 80% of like all wounded people are shrapnel or concussions. Very few gunshots. The first guy that came in was super unlucky because he got shot twice in the shoulder, and then he had shrapnel all up his back and his ass. And so when you're recording casualties, you got to get their permission.
Yeah.
And so he comes in, and I'd never filmed a casualty before, and it's like walking that fine line between getting the footage that you need, but also being respectful.
Yeah.
You know, because like these guys are like literally having the worst day of their life.
Yeah,
Like the last thing that you want to do is like,
Yeah. Hey,
how are you?
it's gonna look awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna look awesome. Like,
yeah.
So like he got wheeled in. I'm like standing there, like my camera's not up because I'm very trying to look like I'm trying to be respectful.
Yeah.
You know, because like I hate going to a unit and then just being that dickhead press guy who is just in the way.
Yeah.
You know, so I was trying to appear respectful because I am. And then like one of the nurses like waves me over to like come film. She's like, "Come do your job." And I was like, "Okay." I needed some. I needed a little pep talk beforehand, you know. And so this guy, they get him naked. He's like laying face down. And my translator asks him if I can film him. And he like says something and does one of these like things. And I was like, "What did he say?" He's like, "Yeah, just blur out my asshole."
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we filmed him like using this magnet to pull all the shrapnel like out of his ass and stuff like that. It was like they pulled a bullet out of his shoulder and they showed it to me. I got good shots of the bullet they just pulled out of him. There's this one guy though.
Keep going.
There's this one guy that I still think about a lot. Didn't interview him, but he walked in and I thought he was a black guy.
Yeah.
At first, and then I like caught my attention. I was like, "There's not many black people in Ukraine."
No.
And I like looked at him more, and it was like he was like a middle-aged white guy, but he was so covered in like dirt that he looked black.
Yeah.
They like cleaned his face off, and they sat him down in a chair, and I asked what was wrong with him. One of the nurses said he had a concussion and shell shock, and looking at his face was one of the more eerie things than scary. I think scary is the right word to use. Because the things he must have seen to have this look on his face, it was just dead. Mm-hmm. Like he was sitting there like, I can't even recreate it accurately. He was just sitting there like staring. They're trying to talk to him and it was just nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Like the things he must have seen to like rip his soul out. That's that's the best way to put it. It looked like he had his soul ripped out of him. Mm-hmm. He was just sitting there. He just looked defeated. He was filthy.
Yeah.
And it's one of the scariest and saddest things I think I've ever seen, because it's like, what does a human being have to go through where that is the outcome?
Yeah.
Where that's what you end up as.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask to interview him afterwards, but I was still at the moment filming that first guy. So I was going to ask to see if I could at least try to talk to him. Like 30 minutes goes by and he's still sitting.
Yeah.
Just staring off wherever he is. And a couple more minutes goes by, I look behind me and he's gone. And after I'm done filming the guy who is wounded in the back, I ask one of the nurses where that guy went. And they're like, oh, they sent him back to the front. And I hope he makes it through the war.
Yeah.
And I hope that he finds some peace someday, because the look on his face is something I will never forget. Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine what it's like for him.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to write an article about him, and I still can't verbalize the way that he made me feel.
Yeah.
Just the look on his face. I wish I could.
Mm-hmm. Well, they talk about that, like the World War One shell shock and World War II, but I mean like the World War One shell shock. And you think about too, like for him, I don't know what his age was, but like I said, some of these guys that are fighting, and you kind of feel like that with guys that are conscripted, or even it happened to guys that were willing to go fight. But I feel like the guys that are kind of forced into it a little bit more, like you're not ready for that. Like I feel like if you joined, you're young, you're like, we're gonna do this. You can still get shell shocked.
You're at least at some point expecting,
exactly,
like, not asking, but you're more willing to endure these things.
Exactly, yeah. This is a guy that was like, I gotta go fight. You know, he's like said, he's middle-aged, might have a family. He's like a fucking IT dude, whatever. And now and then boom, you throw him into like hell. You know, I shouldn't say a natural reaction, but it's more understandable, you know, because, you know, and like there's guys I remember in Iraq that were driving the highway for IEDs, man. And they were just like, one kid froze up. He just couldn't leave. Our battalion commander was telling us, and you know, he's like, hey, if you guys, you know, there was a guy, he went out like 6 times, guy with like 6 IEDs, and he just couldn't like start the truck anymore. And I was like, yeah, what the fuck would he start the truck for, man? Like one of these are gonna get him, and he knows it. Like it's not even like you're like, you know, like you just keep fucking getting hit. It's the same route. It's not even like, man, what they're doing a different route. It's the same fucking MSR. Coming to us, you know, and going to Haklania or going to Bar. It's the same. It's one main MSR. There's no fucking highway. Oh, you check this road. It's the same one. He's getting hit like every fucking day. So it's
The reaction's understandable, man.
Yeah. It's totally. I was like, yeah, and the guy's like lead truck, like in one of these IEDs are gonna fucking blow him up, and like he's already been hit 6 times. Like fuck yeah, man. Like call it. You know, let him breathe for a little bit. Like you have to, you know, it's not bitching out or anything. You're just like, dude, it's just enough's enough. You just need to get like a real recovery time. They said that too. I think it was like in World War One. If you'd let them recover, it's like, then they'll get back to normal. Like, you know, you don't go back to the front, or don't go, you know, you have to kind of like give that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know,
a good
like
example of that
time.
is another guy I interviewed. His call sign's PKR. I'm not quite sure what that means, but he's like a amphibious special operations medic, and so he's been fighting in Kherson since it was liberated, like over a year ago, like 2 years ago actually. But they give him like little libo breaks, you know, to like just do what you want in Kherson. Like Kherson's like a city that's under attack, but there's still like a lot to do there. It's like, it's a really weird place. Like if you do manage to come with me next time, you'll see it's the most unique part of the entire front line because it's dangerous as fuck, but it's still like you can go eat at a restaurant.
Yeah.
I like.
I told my wife, I was like, the sushi there is amazing. Like in Ukraine, it's shocking.
I wouldn't trust sushi in fucking like Kramatorsk of all places. But yeah, and he had some of the craziest war stories I've ever heard. And he was talking about like the island fighting. To me, that would be the worst part of the war.
No.
Is the island fighting. Like one of the questions I asked him was like, what's like an act of like bravery that you've seen? Like going, because he's done 7 trips to the other side of the river. And he's like, simply getting in the boat is an act of bravery because it's estimated 80% casualties.
Yeah.
And he's done 7 trips there and back. And it ranges from like a week out there to a month, you know? Because on the islands, you can't dig in. It's all sand and tall grass and just swamp and water. He was talking about a firefight that he was in where there was like 3 of them and they were walking through like this like chest deep water and they heard movement in front of them. So they all kind of like Navy SEALed like deeper into the water, you know, and they didn't know who the guys in front of them were because they knew that there was like a Marine unit working nearby, like a friendly Marine unit. And they didn't know if these were Russians or the Marines, and they tried to keep an eye out for them. And then they saw there was red tape on one of the buttstocks of the guys, and so they were Russians. And so they opened fire. And they're literally in chest-deep water in, like, an engagement 5 meters away from this other group of guys. And he's like, in that kind of environment, you can't maneuver. Like, wherever you are, you start firing, you're either going to win that fight or you're going to die. Yeah. And he was talking about how his only worry during that was if he got killed, his body would sink to the bottom and his friends would never find him. And there'd be no body to like send home to his family.
Jeez. Yeah. Yeah. That's to me so wild. Like the amount of like the different tactics and almost environments like in this war.
It's everything.
Yeah, other than mountains. So I guess you know what I mean. Like they're not fighting.
If the Russians get to the Carpathians, we'll have more stories like that.
Exactly. Yeah. That's like the last I don't want to say the last bastion of it, but you're like, yeah, man, like they're fighting in water and they're trying to do incursions and you know, it's wild. Yeah,
because he's got some crazy stories there. Like the islands for me would be like my personal hell because like there's nothing to do except get drone bombed. Yeah. So he was talking about he's got a funny story about a drone. That's actually like pretty funny. I'm trying to get like an animator to like animate the story. So they're on like these rubber craft, right? And they're taught when you land, the people on the boat get off of the front of it, and the people waiting to get on wait. But the people who had been on the island already had been there for like weeks, and they just wanted to get the fuck off. And so as soon as the boat hit the beach, the guy started boarding without letting them off. And so he looks off to his left, and he sees another boat where the same thing is happening, and the guys in the back of the boat jump off into the water, and it's like knee deep. Yeah. So he's like, okay, well, it's probably like the same depth where I am. He jumps off, almost drowns. Like it's straight to the bottom. He like grabs onto the side and like pulls himself up, and he's like super pissed off at this point because it's like November. Yeah. And he's soaking wet.
Yeah, it's gonna be a bad
day. So he's like, fuck. Like, yeah. I'm pissed. And so he gets like back onto the boat and he goes onto the island. And how they work there, I don't know if I should say this. X happens. Yeah. He goes to dry his clothes off. And so he's like laying his clothing on like this tall grass to like let it like drip onto the sand. And so he's like naked on the beach standing there smoking a cigarette. And he looks off and he sees this Russian drone, like a Mavic, like a Recon, just sitting there watching him. And he thought in his head, he wasn't scared. He just thought how hard the Russian drone operators must have been laughing because they flew all the way over there looking for some kitted, ready to go special operations guy. And all they see is a naked dude on a beach smoking a cigarette. Yeah. So I'm trying to get an animator to like animate that story. He tells it way better than I do. But that's one of my favorite stories I've ever documented, just because it's like only in war. You know, that's a story that only happens in war, and it's only funny in that context.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, then and like I said, the aspect of those are like the small stories that you're capturing that literally like no one would. You can't like make it up. Like let's say that real life is weirder than fiction. You know, or whatever. Like you can't make it up. Like you can't be like, oh yeah, this is what then happened. It's always like some big act of whatever. But this is like you're capturing all those small little moments that you know people think about. I think that's important to capture.
And he didn't even think that was worth talking about. You know, that was like after like 3 hours of interviewing, and I was like, did anything like funny happen? He's like, oh, this is kind of funny. And I was like, dude, that's one of the fucking funniest combat stories I've ever heard. Like, that's a naked dude on a beach.
Yeah. Well, I think said in fucking Iraq, that happened with me and my buddy. We got wet and stuff like that, but we were watching the Iraqi swimsuit channel, and this was it was me and Guthrie. We're sitting in the room. And I was a dipshit. You always keep your weapon on you, but it was like we'd gone in this house enough that I just like kept it in the room, and it was just the next room over. And it was almost like I was like just walking around, and I was like, oh, I'll just whatever. And literally, so they hit our house with a machine gun into the room that I was in, and then I'm in a different room. So me and Guthrie get up and we bolt towards the door and we get stuck in the fucking door together. So we literally get stuck. It's like a comedy of errors, like cartoon where you're like stuck in this door and we can't like move. We can't get out, you know. And it's like it seems like forever. And we literally just like, and we finally, you can tell. I remember he started laughing and I started laughing. I was like, "Are you fucking serious right now? We're like stuck in a door, like it's just like a cartoon." And then we finally pushed through the door, and I remember him, you know, flying forward, and then I remember him like sliding into his door, the next door down, and then the right away to the right. I jump into ours, like you know, taking cover down, and the fucking room's just like just, you know, and just dust everywhere, and they're shooting through the window, and then. After it's all settled, it was like a hit and run, you know. They ambushed us, and like from a vehicle, they just like shot a machine gun, and it went right through the windows, like, and they just fucking drove off. And then one of my team leaders, or it might have been my squad leader, he was like, "I'm gonna shoot the window at these guys, and it's gonna shatter, and then I'll see out the door or out the window, and then I can keep firing." He shoots the window, and the bullets just go right through the window. So he's like, he still can't see shit. Now he can't see anything anymore. Like even worse, because now there's like webs.
It's just
of
like
glass.
keyholes through the window.
It's like keyholes through the window. Because he thought it was gonna be like the movies where you shoot the glass and everything shatters and you can keep firing at him. It's like no, he's pop pop. And now it's like now he can't see shit because everything's like webbed.
That's the cherry on top for that.
Oh
story.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, watch this.
Yeah, watch this. And, dude, my buddy had a lieutenant fire a 203 during a firefight at a door, but it was way too fucking short, and it just bounced off. And they're like so pissed at it because then they had to get EOD out there in the middle. You know, it was the middle of a firefight, and they're like, now we have live ordnance like hanging out because he was like, "Oh, I got it." And he was gonna shoot the door off. You know, like I'm gonna shoot this, gonna blow the door open, and it just hits it, poof. And now they're like, "What the fuck?" Now we have a you know, it's like it's in the weird days of Iraq where it was like we'd get into firefights, but then there was still like some sort of like bullshit admin thing, like, oh, that's a live UXO. Now we got to sit here and then let the other unit go at the firefight, you know. And it was, it's fucking ridiculous shit. But those are the small stuff though that you're capturing. Like I said, the guy on the beach, just you know, being like, "Fuck you," smoking a cigarette. There's like a
like,
Russian drone.
He's literally got that attitude. He's like one of the most badass like guys I've ever met. Yeah, he literally just has that like "fuck you" attitude sort of thing.
So then, Kirsan, then so you actually guys got hit with artillery, or not got hit with artillery, but you guys
fucking close.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I got it on camera too. I set up my camera like literally a minute before that happened. So the first night we were in Kherson. I was very sketched out because it's like, okay, I've heard a lot about this city. Let's stick our toes in the water to kind of figure out what it's like. So we're staying in this house, like this wooden house on the northern edge of the city, you know, like out of drone range, like in artillery range still, but you know, what are the odds? Yeah. You know. So we're setting up, and I set up my camera in the window to record for the purpose of recording audio. You know, I did that every night when I was there. I put my camera out the window, and I had it like hooked up to a battery pack, so just recorded the whole night. So I set it up, and then we were talking about what incoming and outgoing sounds like in case we had to figure it out. And and I was saying, like, okay, if it's incoming, you're gonna hear like a,
Yeah.
and if it's outgoing, you're just gonna hear a boom, and then the and literally as soon as I finished talking about that, we hear, and it like hits right next to the fucking house.
Yeah.
And like you can hear it on the audio, like all the like metal and shrapnel and like dirt hitting the building, hitting the window. And then I walk into the kitchen, like where the camera's recording, and the other journalist, Jay Schnell, who's with me, he's like, "Holy shit, did you get that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got it all. I'll send it to you." And there's a lot of stuff like that. They just randomly shell the city at like random times in the day. There's a lot of artillery duels too, because right after that, we figured out there was like a self-propelled Ukrainian artillery gun somewhere near us because it fired like a minute after that. And then there's more incoming, more outgoing. And it was like that, like for like 4 hours, we're just in the middle of an artillery duel, like sitting in this wooden fucking house. Like we picked a bad fucking spot for the first night. So the night after that, we're like, okay, like we could see across the river if we're higher up. So we get this apartment that's on like the 15th floor of like a 17th floor apartment. And we're recording, nothing happens like the whole night. While I'm sleeping, I hear this explosion way off in the distance. And I recorded a Ukrainian artillery gun knocking out a Russian one. And it like detonated all the ammo that was there. And I got it all on camera. You can see the fucking big poof off in the distance. And then like that same night or something, I was like changing the batteries on my camera. No, in the morning. I was changing the batteries on my camera, and like a Russian drone like buzzed right over the window, scared the shit out of me. Like plain as day, right in front of me. Like just right over the building. It scared the shit out, because I thought in my brain, FPV drone. Yeah. So I literally scream like a fucking girl and run into the room and into the hallway. And Jay's like, "What?" I'm like, "There's a fucking drone outside," And Jay's a pretty funny guy too. A little nervous. Yeah. A little like crack addict, kind of nervous. Like there was one night where another artillery round came so close to the building that it set off all the car alarms near us. And he's running around like turning all the lights off. Yeah. And we're like the other side. Like the Russians can't see the light. Yeah. And he's like turning all the lights off. He's like, we gotta be careful of the drones and the artillery, man. And he's running around like sticking candles on plates, like lighting them. And it's even brighter in there than before, but because it's a candle, he thinks it's like different. Less bright. Yeah. I was like, Jay, like, this is not gonna work, dude. Like, these are still light producing. Yeah, it's just funny stuff like that. But then, artillery all the time. Kherson, it doesn't go like 20 minutes without hearing an explosion somewhere in the city. Yeah, that's shit. Everywhere you go, there's cars with like little pieces of duct tape scattered on them because of shrapnel. Yeah. Vehicles, fair game for drones. If you're driving like a truck or anything that looks military, it's gonna get fucking hit. Yeah. I was told when I was there not to wear body armor. Yeah. Because they'll see that. And they'll either kill you right there, or they'll wait to see where you're going, and then blow that building up. And so I brought like soft armor, like a police vest that they wear, and I was like wearing that under a hoodie the whole time I was there. And then we were in cars and stuff. I'd have like my helmet on. One of the sketchiest parts that like ended up being pretty cool. So like to get to the island of Ostrov, it's like right on the southwestern part of Kherson. You got to cross this bridge, and like there's tons of drone footage, like Russian footage of like cars getting hit there by drones. And so my first time crossing that bridge, I was sketched the fuck out because I don't want to die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to get with a drone.
Yeah, because you got to go like through a roundabout to get there, and so it takes like a while to get across this bridge. And then there's a checkpoint there, and they usually roll you right through because they don't want to get hit either. Yeah. But right as we're about to come up to the to get to the bridge, the Ukrainian national anthem starts playing on the radio, and then everyone in the car speaks Ukrainian, and they all start singing the national anthem. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm like, this is, let's fucking go, boys. Yeah. And we're like driving through this neighborhood that's like totally fucked. Like it gets hit by artillery all the time because there's Ukrainian military all over there. There's like positions everywhere, and I was told not to go into random buildings because there might be a drone team in there and they might shoot you.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Because they're operating. So like there's lots of Russian drone teams on the other side of the river. There's lots of Ukrainian ones too, fighting back. So it's not just like a helpless city. You know, like there's army there defending the people. But yeah, there's drones everywhere. Artillery always hitting. And then people ask me, like, what's the point of, like, fighting over the islands? It's to stop the Russians from bringing up mortars, too, to hit the city. Because if they can hit mortars, they can...
Because they get within range.
Yeah, they get within mortar range, and then it's
yeah.
more dead fucking civilians.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, pretty much this whole southern half of Kherson was designated to be a red zone. And so that's, like, a self-declared, like, good to go for the Russians, where it's like, if you're in here, you're fair game. We're going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And they upload videos all the time on Telegram of them just like, they killed a fucking woman on a bicycle.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what kind of military target is that? But so like northern Kherson, you can like go out and like, there's like hookah bars that are like, you can sit outside. This is why it's such a weird city.
Yeah.
So it's like the northern part, it's like a normal city, you know, it's a city of 300,000 people, but there's only like 50,000 people still living there. And the further south you go, the more it feels like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Because the less people you see, the more fucked up the buildings are. Mm-hmm. And then when you stop seeing the local drunks wandering the street, and when you stop seeing the dogs, the stray dogs that are around, that's when it's like, okay, you need to be fucking careful.
Yeah.
And so we did a really fucking stupid thing, and we just walked around this area. We walked like for an hour. Very lucky, didn't see anything, but it was like one of the constant, you know, I got home and I was still like, and I would find myself like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, there's no drones in Nebraska.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
You know, but it's a dangerous fucking city. Mm-hmm. Everywhere you, and it's people are still living there.
Yeah.
You know, like there's an old man. I remember at a bus stop, and like the bus stops there have HESCO barriers in like a half circle around them.
Yeah.
So it's like, if a drone like strikes there, or if you see one above you, you can like try to like stand on the opposite side of the HESCO barrier of where the drone is. Yeah. All the playgrounds have HESCO barriers around them. Grocery stores, anything that's open has a HESCO barrier if it's lucky. Mm-hmm. It's just a dangerous fucking city. Yeah. And there's maybe like 20 Westerners there. Yeah. And all the people who are there were there under occupation too, and so they're very like weary of cameras. So like when I was there, I wasn't allowed to film. So I used my DJI Osmo to record like secret squirrel, like, you know, because you know it's got like a little gimbal on it, so I can just hold it down at my side and record that way. Even the street sweepers wear body armor. Yeah, you know, like the linemen working on the electricity, they're wearing body armor. Everyone who can afford it is wearing body armor around that city if they have to be outside the southern part.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah, if it's like that type of danger. Yeah, which is wild.
It's just crazy.
Yeah,
it's but I love it. Yeah, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. It's so beautiful, and the food there is great. The people are some of the nicest I've ever met, other than the collaborators. Yeah,
yeah, you know? Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Is I think I was shocked when I went in fully into Ukraine with the Kyiv and then down to Izium, like how beautiful the country was, good the food was, how awesome the gas stations are.
I was there 30 days. I probably had borscht like 55 times.
See, we were the opposite. We only had borscht once, and it was at a really nice restaurant, or it was a restaurant that was like really, it was kind of nice, and it was like, and we got it. Like one of the guys worked up he was a U.S. Army or veteran, and then he was with 3AB, and he was like in the beginning too. Mm-hmm. He had gotten like shot or something, almost died, and then he's had surgeries, and he's part of 3rd Assault Brigade now, but he was the one that let us his vehicle, but he was like, oh yeah, here's the, and we had it. It was like really good, but it was the only time we ever had borscht.
Dude, borscht is like, I crave it now.
Yeah.
The best borscht I ever had was at the front line. Yeah. It was like this 3-day-old pot of borscht that they like heated up for us, and it's called like salma or something. It's like salted bacon fat. Yeah. And then like they have like garlic as well that's on like the side, and I just put it in the borscht and like ate it like that. But just culturally, like it's so different than here. Like these guys have been out at positions for like days. Yeah. Right. And they like cooked this food. They heated this food up for us. They made this nice charcuterie board. Yeah. Like at a frontline position, right? Yeah. And it was to feed the whole like platoon of guys that was there. And so we were in the kitchen, and they're like, yeah, go ahead, get like a bowl and eat. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there like eating, and I'm like, where's everyone else? Yeah. And my translator is like, they're waiting for you to finish eating first. Like you're the guest here. Yeah. Like they're not going to eat until you do. And I was like, it's like 1 PM. Like, aren't these guys fucking hungry? They're like, oh yeah, they're hungry, you know. But
Good one, Nick.
But you're the
Yeah.
guest here, you know. Like they're being respectful. And I was like, wow, like fucking people here.
Yeah. So you got any with battles and beers now? You kind of got, like I said, you're doing the archival. You get the taste of the war journalism stuff going into the shit. Is there any other spots you think about going here other than Ukraine? Obviously, Ukraine's a very big draw. I mean, there's obviously plenty. It's not like it's a dried up or like with Syria kicking off and.
At the moment, I'm trying to do Ukraine as many times as I can, because this is gonna sound like selfish, but it's like we may not get to cover a war like this again.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
So I'm trying to get like as much experience as I can and to document as many of these stories as I possibly can before it's over. So I'm like trying to invest as much of my time into that as I can. I would love to go to Marawi in the Philippines, where that big fucking like siege was against ISIS with the Philippine army there. Like the battle's over, but like all the veterans are still there.
Yeah.
Like the city's still fucking destroyed. Iraq as well. If I can go, Afghanistan, Burma as well, Syria. We'll see. I mean, if there's like a war going, I'm not opposed to going.
Yeah.
You know, like I've even thought about like going and like reaching out to the cartel
and
being like, hey, can I chat with you before like Trump destroys all you guys?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I swear I'm not a CIA plant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because a lot of it is just forming these relationships before you go.
Yeah.
That's like honestly most of it is just knowing enough people on the ground before you go. Because like that was my big like crutch. I'm sure I could have gotten a lot more done in Israel if I knew a lot more guys in the IDF. Like I know people everywhere in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like I think we stayed in an Airbnb like once.
Yeah.
The whole rest of the time was staying at people's houses that I had known or interviewed and stuff like that. And it just made it so much easier to go around and interview people.
Yeah.
And so it's all about building those connections. So like if I wanted to go to like Burma or Myanmar, I'd have to, like buddy up and meet more people involved there and get their trust to be able to go.
Yeah.
So.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, anywhere there's a war, I'm willing to go.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, I'm willing to rock and roll. I can't. This is what I want to do. I don't really get paid for this at the moment, but that's not super important to me. Like I've paid out of pocket for every single trip that I've done, but I don't care. I love it. So it's my passion. I love storytelling and adrenaline too. Now I get it to a small degree.
Yeah, you got bit.
Yeah, got bit. I think about going
Chasing
back
the
all the
dragon.
time. I can't wait to go back to Ukraine. Just meet more of the people and create more dad lore. I just want to be the coolest dad at the PTO meeting.
Fuck yeah, dude. Yeah, my dad took off to Ukraine. He's covering war stories.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
It's fucking I'm pumped that we finally got to meet.
Yeah, me
finally
too,
got
man.
out here. All the war stories, like here and everything. I mean, I know you have a slew of like, you've written books. I know you guys. It's like insane.
800 stories
archives.
documented.
Yeah.
So it's like picking onesies and twosies out can be difficult.
Yeah. So where can people check you out?
Primarily on Instagram and YouTube. I have a Facebook page, but I'm so like shadow banned on there. I don't even bother posting anymore. I'm battles_and_beers on Instagram. And I also have my personal one where I post on all the time. It's Nick Laidlaw. And then on YouTube, I'm Battles and Beers War Stories.
Fuck yeah. Awesome, bro. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.